And we're live. Hello, everybody. And after that overly dramatic introduction, I'd say a big hello to everybody who's out there waiting to listen to this. So I'm Dave.
I'm Steve.
I'm Nodge.
And welcome to tonight's chat about the Dyatlov Pass incident. Let's have a look who we've got with us quickly in the chat. We've got... hello, Louise. Hello, Gillian. Hi, Mags. Paranormal Chapel. Hi, Shrimp Shack. Raveness, thank you for dropping by. Who else have we got? We have Shelley. Hi. Hello, Matthew. Thanks for stopping in. Jane. Stranger Times. Good to see that you're there, sir. And who else? Michael. Thank you. Helly. Thank you. Gillian. I think I've already said hello to you, but you can get it twice. And Haley from Ghost Adventures of Cornwall. So, an interesting one tonight, guys.
Well, I certainly think it is. It sort of, excuse me, has a little bit of everything in it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's...
Absolutely.
Okay, so a broad outline is, well, a hiking expedition, if you like, adventurers gone massively wrong. Steve, do you want to give us an overview?
Well, like you said, there's 9 hikers. Initially, there was 10. One of them fell ill and went back. But the 9 that went up into the Ural Mountains, they were all Certificate 2 hikers and desperately trying to get Certificate 3, which was the best hiking certificate they could get. Anyway, they went up through the Ural Mountains on this trek that they'd been given to get this grade from. This was roughly between the 1st and 2nd of February when they actually hit where they eventually did camp out. They established a camp on the slopes of the Col Sayal, and now it's been named in honor of the group's leader, Igor Dyatlov, so it's now called Dyatlov Pass. During the night, something caused them to tear their way out of their tents and flee the campsite. All of them inadequately dressed for the heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures that were outside. When it was discovered that they were actually late getting back from for the time that they were supposed to have been back, they actually went out looking for the group. And when the bodies were discovered, an investigation by Soviet authorities determined that they had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 showed, that 6 had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 showed signs of physical trauma. One victim had a fractured skull, 2 others had major chest fractures, and the body of one of the group was missing both its eyes. One of the victims was also missing a tongue. The investigation concluded that a compelling natural force had caused the deaths. Numerous theories have been put forward to account for the unexplained deaths, including animal attacks, hypothermia, avalanche, katabatic winds, infrasound-induced panic, military involvement, even UFOs and aliens and Yetis. Anyway, last year, Russia opened up a new investigation into the Dyatlov Pass incident, and the conclusions were presented in July just gone. We'll come to those conclusions later, but in a nutshell, that's basically it.
Okay, well, this is a nice look at that. That makes it almost look beautiful, if not ominous and sinister, given what had gone on. So the team, the group of youngsters that had gone up, what type of experience did they have regarding this kind of thing? You know, mountaineering, staying out in the wild. Have you any idea? I'm sure you've done a little bit of looking into that.
They were all extremely well prepared for this kind of thing. Like I say, they were all what they call grade 2 or certification 2 hikers, which meant that they could traverse nearly every possible path through the mountains throughout most of Russia. Now, they were all youngsters, which were based at the university. I've got it written down, so you have to bear with me. I've had a long trip today, so my brain's not working as well as it should have been.
Some of them were Ural Polytechnical Institute.
That's it, Ural Polytechnical. And what they wanted to do was get this grade 3 certificate, which would mean that they had to attain a certain height over a certain terrain, withstanding certain conditions, which was what this, when they were going, the route that would have took them would have been able to do this. Now, some of them had sort of hiked together over the years. Some of them had been, in fact, nearly everybody in the Polytechnic wanted to be part of Igor Dyatlov's team because he was well renowned for being one of the best hikers. in the university. Not only that, he was an absolute genius. He was sort of like used to make his own shortwave radios and stuff like that, which at the time wasn't a very nice thing because the Russians didn't like people having shortwave radios, but he had a room at home for it. So yeah, they were all very, very experienced. And
just to give everybody an idea, Grade 3 was the highest certification available to outdoorsmen, and it basically required the candidates to traverse 200 miles, nearly 300 kilometers. So I mean, they were all experienced outdoorsmen, all of them, more or less. And I think the average age was about 24, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the oldest one there, he was
38. That was
and people found this strange. Why was that the case? But he was actually a tutor who gave some of the lessons in doing the hiking and took them on the original hikes to get the certification. But there's also some strange stories regarding him, which we'll probably come to later on as well.
Yeah.
So obviously, well experienced, knew what they were doing. So to all intents and purposes, no real reason to expect anything out of the ordinary regarding this particular expedition.
No, nothing at all. As far as they were concerned, they lodged their route with the necessary people, because you all had to lodge these routes. So if there was a problem, they would be able to find you. The territories that they were going through was known. They had plenty of maps for it. They'd spoken to members of groups who'd actually hiked in those areas. They knew the terrain. They knew what they would come up against. They'd actually been out in temperatures which were lower than recorded on the mountain that night, and in conditions which were worse. So technically, they should have been able to handle anything that sort of came at them.
Okay, well, let's start as we mean to go on. The Dyatlov Pass incident, 1959. Okay.
Well, this is going to be basically just some information in regards of what went on and some of the people there. So you say Dyatlov Pass incident, 1959. This is the hiking group. Igor Dyatlov, age 23, an electronics engineer, shortwave radio enthusiast, technical know-how legendary at the Sverdlovsk Ural Polytechnic Institute. Extremely competent hiker. Now, let's say they're all basically youngsters. You can see that straight away from the pictures there. Yuri Doroshenko, you'll have to sort of like bear with me for any dodgy stuff that I come along with. He was another one that was a skilled hiker. He was one of the group that wanted to sort of again be with Igor's group, because Igor was legendary in most of the stuff that he was done. And as soon as he used to announce that he was going on a hike, people would literally come forward. And on this one, Yuri, unfortunately, at the time he thought fortunately, was one of those who actually got into the group. Ludmilla, or Luda, as she was known as, Dubinia, she was only age 20. She was a student of construction economics. She was strong with a high pain threshold, and on a previous trip she'd been shot in the leg in a hunting accident and was carried for 50 miles out of the Siberia's Russian eastern Sayan mountains. Apparently she was cracking jokes and keeping people happy all the way, even though she was in an amount of pain. She was also a fervent communist. Yuri Yudin, you can see him there bottom right, he was the gent who actually survived this because he came home early. He was a geology student, least likely member of the group, as he had he had loads of conditions which caused problems. He had a heart condition, he had a chronic knee problem and back pain, and he suffered with rheumatism. He'd been off previously, a year off school because of illness, but he enjoyed hiking, and he went home because of back pain and double back. Basically, he did a little bit of geology on the way, then spent the rest of the hiking winter, as they put it, with his family. Yuri Krivonishenko, known as Georgie, he was a construction and hydraulic student. He was the group storyteller, joker, and musician, and often carried around a mandolin with him and break into songs just to bring a bit of levity and fun to the proceedings. Alexander Kolevatov, he was a student of nuclear physics, quite a private person that people said that he was, but again, he was a fervent hiker. Rustem Slobodin, you can see him bottom left, second in, known as Rustic. He had a degree in mechanical engineering. He was rich, gifted musician, mandolin player, but for all his airs and graces and the money in the bank, he was supposed to be unpretentious and extremely friendly. Nikolai Thibault Brignoles, known as Collier, he had a degree in industrial civil construction. He was a great-grandson of French immigrant, well-read with a great sense of humour. Like you said before, all of the group were Class 2 hikers. As you can see there, we've got Semyon Zolotaryev as well. He's second in from bottom right. He was the eldest of the group, and he was also the one, like I say, which some people have had a couple of bones to pick with him. I think I've got some notes. Bottom left, Zinaida Kolmogora. She was also a radio engineering student, lively, bright, and regarded as a pretty tomboy. That's the last known photograph of the group before they set off on the obviously this infamous hike. And Igor Dyatlov as well, 23 years old. There we've got Dovinya, Krivichenko, Thibault Brignoles, and Slobodin having a bit of a laugh with each other. And that's the group's tent as found on the 26th of February 1959 by the investigative team that was sent out on the behest of parents, families, and the university to find them once they realised that they were so many weeks overdue. This is some of the information in regarding of how they were found. Igor Dyatlov, who was the group's leader, he was found between 22nd and 26th of February between the forest and the campsite. What he was wearing not been revealed. Injuries, they was non-recorded, and they put down as cause of death hypothermia. Zinaida Kolmogova, she was also found between the 2nd and 26th of February 59 between the forest and the campsite. Again, nothing released about what she was wearing. Injuries, non-recorded, unusual, cause of death hypothermia. Georgy Krivnichenko, found first 26th February, forest edge underneath a pine tree, wearing, well, barefoot, apart from socks, and wearing only underclothes, which you can imagine in the temperatures which are out there, why on earth would anybody go out and leave the tent just wearing that? Injuries, non-recorded as usual, death, hypothermia. Yuri Doroshenko, found first 26th of Feb 59, where forest edge under a pine tree, again wearing socks and only underclothes, injuries, non-recorded as usual, death, hypothermia. Rustam Slobodin, found between the 2nd and 26th of Feb, where between the forest and campsite, wearing, again, that's not been released, injuries, a minor skull fracture, cause of death, hypothermia. Nicholas Thibault Brignol, found 3rd to the 4th of May 1959, where the forest ravine, 75 metres from the main pine tree, wearing, saying that he was better dressed, but injuries, he had a severely crushed skull, cause of death, fatal injuries, and hypothermia. Ludmila Dubinia, found between the 3rd and 4th of May 59, where forest ravine, 75 metres from the main pine tree, better dressed, and she was also wearing Krivnichenko's pants as shoes. Her injuries included a missing tongue, an oral cavity, and had many broken ribs. Cause of death, fatal injuries and hypothermia, and had trace radiation. Semyon Elksevich Zolotarev, 37, found 3rd to the 4th of May 59. He was found in the forest ravine, 75 metres from the main pine tree. He was better dressed, as he was also wearing Dubinya's coat and hat. Injuries, he had many broken ribs, and the cause of death, fatal injuries and hypothermia, and also found trace radiation on his clothing. Some reports said that all the members of the team had trace radiation, but there was actually only 2, and the only reason that they think that Semyon had the trace radiation because he was wearing coat which belonged to Dubinya. We'll come to that later on. Alexander Kolovetov, found 3rd to 4th of May 1959, where forest ravine, 75 metres from pine tree, wearing, that wasn't released, injuries, non-recorded, unusual, cause of death, hypothermia. And Yuri Yudin, he fell in and returned home before the event and survived. And up until he died, one of the things he said to one of his grandchildren was, when I go and pass to the better place, I hope I have a second just to ask God one question: what happened to my friends? Let's see how all of Igor Dyatlov was found, and if you have a look in the picture there, circled in red, there was some marks on his head. Bodies of Krivnichenko and Doroshenko, they were found in the snow not far from the camp. Bodies of Kolovitchev and Zolotaryov, not pretty viewing. Kolmogora removed from the snow. Body of Lyudmila Dominia on her knees with her face and chest pressed to the rock, which one of the people who found her said it was as though she was trying to look away and escape from something that she was very, very frightened of. That's the body of Slobodin, body of Kolmogora, Nikolai Tybo Brynjo, a young lad, and that's how they found him, saying that, again, some of the investigators saying they looked like they'd aged, but as we know, hypothermia it can affect skin tissue in different ways. That's a memorial to the hikers. Now, this has been put down as the Dyatlov Yeti, where people said that they photographed it. Now, if they'd come across something as important as a Yeti, it would have been in the journals, because one of the things that I have managed to have a look through is in the journals of every day. They put down what they'd seen, what they'd done, even to the fact of what songs they sang, what they'd had to eat. More than likely, from what people were saying, that this is probably Tybo Brynjo out in the snow, and somebody snapped a quick picture of him. But these are unusual because these were found on the film as well. These were glowing orbs which were seen on the mountaintops, not possibly just by the group, because as you can see, they took a photograph of it, but some of the local Mensi tribesmen and people down below witnessed the glowing orange spheres on the mountaintop at the night. And that's that bit over with.
Okay, right. So going off the bodies, and we'll quickly have a look at some more of the bodies, if you just bear with me a sec. They're suggestive of very different ways of, well, not only different types of posture and different locations. I've got a map which will where the bodies were found in relation to where the campsite was. That it was an avalanche wouldn't have followed that particular contour in which the bodies were found. And indeed, the bodies weren't all found at the same time. I believe 2 or 3 of the bodies were found several months later.
Yeah. They got the initial ones first because they were pretty close, but there was others which was found in a ravine like 75 meters away. And yeah, that was a few months later, and that was why I think it took so long for them to actually start doing the inquest, which they did. But like you say about the avalanche theory itself, I mean, yeah, the Russian government, that's their initial line now, that it was an avalanche. But the location of the incident didn't actually have any signs of an obvious avalanche. An avalanche would have left certain patterns, and the debris from like the campsite and the bodies and that would have been distributed over a wide area. But the bodies that were found within the month of the event, they were covered with only a very, very shallow layer of snow. And if there had been an avalanche of the strength which they're trying to make out, would have swept everyone away, blah, 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 especially the second party, then those first initial ones would either have been swept away or covered with more snow, and also had more serious injuries than those which were found at the tree line, because obviously they were closer. Since that point of the expedition, there's been over 100 different expeditions to the region, and strangely enough, a lot of them will not go up there with 9 members of the party. It's either less or more than 9 members. None of these expeditions that have gone up there have reported any kind of conditions that might create an avalanche. In fact, a study of the area, which used up-to-date terrain mapping physics, revealed that the location was entirely unlikely for any kind of avalanche-like to have ever occurred. The dangerous conditions found in another area nearby, which had steeper slopes and more bends, well, what they call cornices, were observed in April and May when the snowfalls of winter were melting. During February, when the Dyatlov Pass incident occurred, these conditions didn't even exist. An analysis of the terrain and the slope shows that even if there had been a very specific avalanche, that it would have found its way around, and its path would have gone past the tent. It had collapsed from the side, the tent had, but not in a horizontal direction. Anyway, like I say, that's basically the no side of what the official line is. But whichever way you look at this, whether they did get caught up in an avalanche, whether the hypothermia did set it, you've got to ask what made them initially run from the tent, because the tent was sliced at the back for them to get out of. It was still tied up at the front. Nobody attempted to get out. They tried to go at the back. In fact, somebody said that there was when they investigated it, there was a hole in the tent which looked as though it had been put there so they could look through it to see if everything was okay outside, and then they make the big slices underneath it to escape out of the tent.
Yeah, okay, understood. And also, given the fact that there's had that the body's been swept by an avalanche, that debris, as you said before, would have followed the same path as the bodies. Yet most of the belongings were pretty much inside the tent, although the tent obviously showed signs of some kind of destruction, of rips and tears and so on and so forth. But it wasn't swept away in the same way. Now, they've heard an avalanche coming, and the first thing they've done, we're led to believe, is run higgledy-piggledy all over the place in different directions, some into the tree line and some down the ravine.
Yeah, that's what basically what they say. And then at some point, some tried to get back, whether it be for clothes or whether it be to get some kind of fire lit. In fact, they did try to light a fire near one of the trees, but again, it's still one of those things that they may have panicked, but how can I put this? Everybody that they've interviewed regarding this group said that there was no signs of panic apart from the fact of running out of this tent. It's as though they just upped and went, and for no apparent reason. Yeah, avalanche. Would you get that kind of warning? Would you get enough to come out? Would you look through a hole in the back to see if it was coming and go, oh, hang on a minute, here it is now, let's slice the bottom of it and take a run out of it? Do you open up the front? If you don't open up the front, is that going to offer any form of protection to give you a chance to get out of the back of it? I don't know. I'm no expert. I don't see this case from one side or another. All I'm trying to do is express, all the different theories that have been given over the time. So something which is called very mysterious, and just present it in a way that people can make a mind up at it themselves or do some research and look at it themselves.
As you look at the map of the distribution of the bodies there, you can also see the brooks and the river, which obviously form a valley or gully down the side of the face of the mountain, and you see the disposition of the bodies are in a diagonal line to the natural contours of the geographical nature of the ground, which suggests not following the path that an avalanche would take, which would obviously go to a low point under gravity. It would travel via gravity. It wouldn't defy gravity and turn corners of its own volition. It would follow you would feel it would follow the gully, which you can see there, where you got the brook 2, brook 3, brook 4, not so nice brooks there, and the Lozhva river, and the bodies being disposed in various positions and in various groups.
It's interesting, something that you just stated there about gravity and its effects on it. One of the which we'll come to later, one of the theories about what happened was in fact a gravity fluctuation, which some scientists have looked at this quite seriously to say this is a possibility of what may have happened as well. But let's say we'll come to that later on.
Okay, well, Nodge, what are your thoughts so far? Do you want to chip in with anything that you think? Looking at the map there and the contours of the ground, obviously it's hardly a detailed map, but it does give a disposition of the bodies in relation to the rivers and brooks, which would form natural fissures down the side of the mountain.
It does. It feeds into two sort of distinct thought processes that you can have about this. One is the cover-up stroke mystery type thing. There's been various theories put forward, from infrasound to military testing to weird and wonderful katabatic winds and all that sort of thing. There is also a psychological thing known when people are caught in very, very cold conditions. It's happened to Arctic explorers, called paradoxical undressing, where because hypothermia actually brings on very strange delusions and behavior, you get this known behavior known as paradoxical undressing, where the subjects actually remove the clothes because they feel burning warmth, because actually when you get very bad hypothermia in ice and snow, you actually it starts to
the hypothalamus goes into overdrive, and it makes it feel like you're heating up when you don't. And in that case, what people start to take the clothes off instead of putting them on because they think that they're getting warmer. I think the thing that you were trying to what's the word you used, the psychological side of it was Arctic hysteria, also known as Meriacane, which that sort of gives people they literally freak out.
Yeah, I mean, it would sort of partly explain the seemingly random distribution of the bodies. I agree with you, Dave. It doesn't follow the natural pattern that you would expect of an avalanche. Now, there's a guy called Benjamin Radford who is a skeptic about this, a skeptical author, and there's a very famous sort of quote he makes. He said the group woke up in a panic, cut their way out because the avalanche had covered the entrance to their tent. Or they were scared the avalanche was imminent, and that as far as he was concerned, Ludmila Dubinina, whose tongue was missing, as were, I think, her eyes and part of her lips, he thinks that it was likely removed by scavengers. I don't believe that's actually true. The other thing I've always been fascinated by is the Urals are something of an Area 51 for the Russians. There was a lot of military activity there. It was a mere 600 kilometers away, which isn't very far in the context of this incident. 2 years previously, in September 1957, there was the third worst nuclear disaster in history, called the Kishtim disaster, which has been kind of hushed up. It was a plutonium plant where the Russian military made plutonium for missiles. 22 villages were evacuated during this disaster, and it, rather like Chernobyl, there was a lot of fallout, and there was a lot of pollution caused by it for years to come. There were around 250,000 people lived around there, and there's no doubt that the Russian military were very sensitive to discovery of their military research and weaponry. So I'm fascinated by possible connections, even though it wasn't around the corner. I think there's more to this than meets the eye. I'm convinced more than anything that this was definitely covered up. And to be honest, the fact that they reopened the original investigation and came out with basically the same conclusions, that the group were either inexperienced or they'd just been caught in an avalanche, doesn't wash to me. It's never washed. I just don't think it's a credible explanation of what actually happened. As Steve's already said, this group were really, really experienced and highly qualified outdoors people. They knew what they were doing, and they would know where to pitch a tent, and they would know how to act against adverse weather conditions. So I don't believe it for a second.
Well, this is one of the
investigative committee of the Federation, at the request of the families, actually did another sweep, if you like, and according to them, the group leader lacked experience, and as Steve's already said, it doesn't wash. It really doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough photographs taken by the actual group themselves. I mean, the eldest member of the team was an avid photographer, and it was quite well documented, the expedition that they were undertaking. And you only need to look at the type of photographs to see that they had an understanding of fieldcraft and survivalism. And given the level of training that we're at trying to achieve, a level 3, I believe you said, they would be massively versed in understanding adverse weather conditions in their own country.
They could have had, Dave. And the other thing is, I mean, anybody that aspired to any Russian that aspired to do that sort of thing would already be well used to those sorts of conditions. As Steve's already said, that they'd all endured far worse conditions on other expeditions, and the fact to me that the authorities just came out with these blanket explanations of avalanche and they weren't experienced enough is just absolute arrant nonsense.
Well, when it got to the point of where they were actually doing the camp at the night, apparently, according to one of the journals, there was a discussion whether they should actually move further back down the mountain so that they could set up the tents and that, just in case of any problems. And Igor Dyatlov basically said, well, actually, I can't see there being a problem because it's not the kind of place where we're going to come up against something like an avalanche. Okay, yeah, it's ridiculously cold. We're going to get winds, but we know how to set a tent, everything else. We've got a nice little stove to keep warm and that in there. Don't see the problem. And I don't think that we should come down any lower because all the altitude that we made up in today in getting up here we'll lose by going back down again. And who's to say that tomorrow, if the weather picks up again, we might not get as far as we could have got. So that was overridden, and everybody sort of said, yeah, you're right. Now, again, this is the guy who was sort of really sort of like knew his stuff. So they're going to listen to what he said. And I don't think he'd be the kind, from everything that I've read about him, that, put him on a wrong un.
Steve, I was interested in something you were talking about, the orange orb thing. Now, there was a theory that there was a Soviet parachute mine exercise going on, and part of that theory is that alleges that the Russian military were also testing radiological weapons as well. I don't know if you've come across by any of these theories, but one of them says that radioactive dispersal would have affected all the hikers. Now, and I seem to remember that when a witness saw all the bodies, he said that they all had weird sort of tanned, leathered skin. Now, I know that that's sort of consistent with the sort of injuries that they would have suffered, but I don't know. To me, it's an interesting part of the of the whole incident that, the one thing that's not been looked at is that was definitely an area where the Russian military were testing.
On the night, which obviously from the photographs we saw earlier, which pictures were taken by the Dyatlov group, wasn't just them. There was people down below the mountain who could see these spheres. There was the Mansi tribesmen as well who'd seen them. And this, there's even people that are camping lower down on the mountain, about 50 miles away, who could see these higher up. What seems to have come about with some of the research, which is obviously taken away from the Dyatlov Pass incident, but when people have been doing background into weapons testing and stuff like that, is that some of these have been looked at as possibly R7 intercontinental ballistic missiles. The campsite, it was located on the pathway range between the Baikonur Cosmodrome and also to Kiamaya, I think that's the way it's pronounced, Guba, which is a Soviet nuclear testing ground. Now, is this how the radiation got into the clothing of a couple of the hikers? I think not, for the simple reason that because they were all as a team, they were all close together. If two people would have come up with radiation poisoning or radiation on the clothes, I think they would have been, the rest of them probably would as well. Also, because of that, they're also saying that was the snow irradiated and they drank that, when they melted it down to make something to drink, and that, did that cause them to be poisoned and create hallucinations or whatever? But these another thing which is obviously brought up because they've seen these spheres, that introduces then what people class as the UFO and alien angle into it as well. Again, why the hell are you going to come millions of miles to pick out 9 hikers and do some strange experiments on them and then bury them under the snow? I don't know. But you have to also look at the other side. Like you said, Nodge, these spheres definitely could have had something to do with it. But I do think, because they were also, if you remember, there was another type of testing as well, what they were doing, and it was balloons which had concussion bombs or concussion grenades on it, and they come down to a certain height, automatically set off.
These are what I was getting at, Steve. These are the parachute mines which detonate while they're still in the air. Now, apparently, and this is one of the correlations that potentially has always interested me, is that when these weapons explode, they explode in the air, and when they identify a group of soldiers or whatever they're going to use them on, the pattern of the injuries that they inflict create heavy internal organ damage that basically causes massive musculoskeletal trauma. Now, Lyudmila Dubinina had injuries consistent with, and I'm quoting here, the chest fractures were equivalent to a major car crash. Now, that would be consistent with that sort of weapon, and the theory sort of coincides with those reported sightings that you were alluding to, the glowing orange orbs. That's how they would have looked.
But again, this sort of leads me to the fact that, like I was saying before, with the radiation, that a close group, then it would have affected more than just the two. Now, there's some people obviously closer to the tent than others who didn't even have these injuries. I would honestly say that if there was something which exploded quite close to that group with that kind of force, would have caused a lot more injuries to a lot more people.
Possibly.
Okay, well, let's just an overview where we're at. I mean, this happened in 1959. Of course, the Cold War's well on its way, and you say it's this is located fairly close to the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
Yep.
You've got the space race. You've got the development of nuclear weapons, such as the Tsar bomber, and massively yield atomic weapons and nuclear weapons at this time. So, with that being the case, what kind of threat would nine or a group of hikers walking through the snow pose to the Russian military or even the Russian space agency, given the fact that the likelihood of them giving information to the Americans or to the West or so on and so forth? That also has to be called into question, why the Russian government or the Russian military would want to do anything to these particular people. Sorry, Nodge?
The Russian state have always been Stalin killed more people than Hitler. The Russian state have always stamped down even on their own people when they've even accidentally discovered something. They are brutal. I mean, it was a brutal regime and still is to an extent. So I think if they stumbled accidentally onto a testing range or something, the Russian state would have no hesitation whatsoever in taking action.
Of course, and I mean, it's well documented how bad the USSR was and the Soviet policy regarding its own civilians and the subjugation of any ideology that wasn't strictly adhering to the communist line. But even so, you're talking about the masses now. This is a group of people out in the middle of nowhere. And nothing to suggest whatsoever that there was any kind of base or anything going on in that location. No. So it's still fairly dubious that the Russian government or the Russian military would want to silence these people.
But it's one possible explanation. And to be honest, I think it's as good as any. I just don't buy the official line that has always been. That has always been used. I don't think the group died because of an inexperience, and I don't believe that it was just plain hypothermia. 6 of them died of hypothermia, but 3 of them died of extreme bodily trauma. Interesting.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. Yeah, I'll just put up a picture of people at the site recovering the bodies, and obviously you get an idea of what's going on. So people at the site regarded, I suppose that would be some kind of communist or party officials there, as well as climbers to recover the bodies.
I think whenever you had this sort of expedition or any kind of military or police activity, there was always a party official who was there for nothing else other than to advise from a policy point of view for what the Politburo would think or what the state would want them to do. Always, and I think that's probably still the case. But
And given the type of uniforms, the gentleman on the left there and the one on the right nearest to the camera seems to be wearing would be definitely, like we say, party officials, maybe of the NKVD, which was sort of like a precursor to the military branch. That was a precursor to the KGB just after I know they were operated during the Second World War and sort of carried on a little bit after the Second World War too. So there was definitely some kind of high-level officialdom just going off that photograph alone.
But as we've all alluded to already, this was this is the Cold War period, and to be honest, this is a highly paranoid culture to begin with, based on a very different worldview and a suspicion of any other state or any group of people actually stumbling on something that they don't want them to find. Which is why I've always found the Kishtin disaster that preceded this incident very interesting, because there's no doubt that the Russian military were up to all sorts of stuff in the Ural Mountains. All sorts.
I think this is a good a moment as any way to segue into that particular thing if you want to there, Nodge.
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple. I mean, to be honest, Steve and I had a chat about this before, and it's quite possible I'm barking up the wrong tree because this is 2 years before Dyatlov ever sort of happened. But in September 1957, the world experienced the third worst ever nuclear disaster. It's the worst nuclear disaster you've never heard of, probably. Second only after Fukushima and Chernobyl. And basically, it wasn't a civilian installation. This was a plutonium production site in the Ural Mountains that the Russian military were using to manufacture fuel for nuclear weapons, and also reprocessing nuclear fuel for various other things. Over a quarter of a million people were evacuated, and the fallout's, gone across the Ural Mountains for years afterwards, and it's just interesting that that there was a lot of nuclear weaponry produced in that area, and then after the fact there was still a lot of weapons being tested, and our group of hikers may just have stumbled onto something that they shouldn't have stumbled on from. If you look at the radioactive trace map after Kishsim, it's all over the Urals as well. So a lot of radioactivity in that area. It was what they called an INS level 6, a serious accident.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're dealing with an era where the Americans have obviously, forerunners in it. There was sort of like the thing is the Americans were winning the space race throughout the Cold War. So we're led to believe, and the Russians were leading the atomic race,
so
with the development of massive hydrogen bombs at that time, yep. And obviously you've got Operation Castle going on with the Americans, and Operation Ivy with some massive yield nuclear weapons and hydrogen bombs at that time.
Absolutely.
Could I just sort of mention? I don't know what you were saying there in regards of the thingy incident. That's finding my name. The one we knew were talking about anyway earlier, Nodge. Yeah, bless you. I just want to say, in 2016, the head of the Dyatlov Group Memory Public Fund told TASS that he believed, and also it's also from other sources, that there could have been 3 KGB agents within the Dyatlov Group that were sent to the Ural Mountains to provide support for a technological induced experiment. The hikers were carrying a large batch of photo equipment, which was atypical of highly complex expeditions that require maximally alleviating their load. The group was supposed to reach Orta 10 at an appointed time. Once they reached their destination, they were to wait for a technologically induced moment and capture pictures of it, but something went wrong, and this led to their deaths. The claim is backed up by the fact that 10 rolls of film that the group were carrying, and yet only 4 have been released to the public for people to see. This leads people to believe that the missing film contains photos of whatever experiment was being performed, possibly relating to strange light phenomena that was reported in the area, e.g. the spheres. But the 3 people that were mentioned for the KGB agents were Semyon Zolotaryov, which was the eldest member of the group, Alexander Kolovetov, and Yuri Krivnashenko, who worked with nuclear isotopes. They were reckoned for the KGB agents, and they were actually supposed to be there to uncover a cell of CIA agents. They were supposed to deliver radioactive samples to them, take photographs of the Americans, but it looks like it sort of went toes up, according to one of the theories, and the CIA agents killed the group. Again, there's more stuff to that, but if you want, we can go into that further on. But that's one of the theories, that they were actually KGB agents going up there to cause hell, so to speak.
Okay, so KGB agents mixed in with the group, and what is there to actually substantiate that? Is that just another one of these things that are going about regarding it because it's such a high-level, mysterious incident coming out of the old Soviet bloc?
Well, that's just it, isn't it? People are looking through. It's like everything that we sort of look into. There's stories here, there's stories there. It's again, at the end of the day, it's what do you believe? there's a lot to say that especially with Yuri Kovnishenko, who was the physicist who worked with the isotopes, to say that he had a lot to do with the Russian government by some of the funding that he was getting. And also Semyon Zolotaryov, the older one, he sort of got pulled into all sorts of weird stuff, and that was because he was one of the oldest ones of the group. He always seemed to be the odd one out, so to speak. Everyone else was young, but he wasn't. But Zolotaryov, again, who we've just been speaking about, the 37 one who classed as a bit weird. Again, he was sort of, you mentioned them before, David, the NKVD. They think that he was actually linked with them. He bore an enigmatic tattoo which said Dyatlov or something. Again, it's a tattoo that cannot be translated, but they think it's some kind of code word or some sigil which will allow those who have it to be sort of part of the groups, like the old joke of the Secret Seven. Who are the other six? Don't know. It's so secret, even I don't know.
Steve, this is what the Russians call the DNA mystery, isn't it? Because in 2018 they exhumed Zolotarev's body.
Yeah.
The DNA.
He was the only person that was mentioned.
Stand fire, Steve. Go on, say it again, Nodge.
I was going to say they exhumed Zolotarev's body in 2018, and they found that the DNA results were actually contradictory. One of the experts said that the injuries were as described, and one of them said that the DNA analysis didn't actually match any of his living relatives.
Okay, and Zolotarev being the like candid photographer that we're seeing in the picture there, known for massively well documenting the journey, and given the time period, there's actually quite a lot of photographic evidence of what they were doing, and the journey doing it. So he had the ability to and the means to well document what they were doing. And why would he be included within the group for being killed?
Well, another strange thing there, which when Nodge mentioned about the DNA, was that the cemetery that he was actually buried in, he was put in with the rest of the people, some of the people from the group, yet his name wasn't mentioned as part of the people on the list.
Yeah,
they managed to pull him out. They found the DNA, and like Nodge said, that it didn't match any of his living relatives. Yet when they did the facial reconstruction on the skull and looked at the photographs in regards of this gentleman, it matched perfectly, which led people to believe was, hang on a minute, if he doesn't match any DNA, has he assumed the identity of the real Semyon Zolotaryov, or what's going on here, so to speak? But again, it's one of those, it sort of slips through and everyone just goes, okay, it's just one of those weird things that happens. Now, why was he there? Well, apparently he was supposed to be like one of the main people who had taught the majority of these people who were doing the hiking for the hike. But not only that, he wanted to go along and take photographs, and like has been said, all the expensive and extensive amount of photographic equipment that he'd taken, and 10 rolls of film. He must have been taking a hell of a lot of photographs, but why have only 4 been released? 4 rolls. Okay,
we got top second from the top left there, Ludmilla, who was, as you say, an ardent communist. Yeah. So we've got a possible NKVD stroke KGB agent within the group, possible CIA involvement or pertaining to CIA information sharing, and Ludmilla there, who's an ardent communist. So there's definitely a communist element. Given the fact that Ludmilla was a party member.
Well, she was what? They actually classed her as the party cover girl. They said if you put a red neckerchief around her neck and took a photograph of her, she'd be there, and she'd be the perfect example of a party member for the Soviets. But she was. Let me just find. I've got a couple of notes here regarding her. I say you have to excuse me because the brain isn't working. It's been a long day.
So Ludmilla being the ardent communist there, and that was sort of like pretty much a lifestyle for a lot of people, because we're hot on the heels of the Second World War ending. This is just 14 years after the end of the Second World War. So obviously still massive ardent political influenced culture. A lot of people that I'm going to toe the party line voluntarily, but as quite rightly as Nodge said before, we're also dealing with a subjugated nation due to just how inherently volatile Stalin was, and the people that followed Stalin, and the subjugation of the people, like I say, and the pogroms and all the rest of it. This was a culture that was massively subdued by the government. Is that right, Nodge?
Either, Dave, but actually detested, because let's not forget that, you know, when Gorbachev came along, the old Soviet system was ready to fall anyway. These, particularly Stalin, but all the people that followed him in the Politburo, were hated. So people like Lyudmila, although she would be considered to be a good party member, you know, there'd be a lot of suspicion around somebody who's a bit. You know, it's a bit like somebody who's straight-laced and goes to church and all that sort of thing. You know, there were a lot of tensions in Soviet society, and the Soviet and the Russian people, you know, they have as much of a love of conspiracy theories as we do. I mean, there've been all sorts of local conspiracies around Dyatlov, but I think she's a particularly interesting one insofar that her injuries were not consistent with the injuries that you would have expected that group to sustain in that kind of tragedy, you know?
She's the perfect example, though, of what would be a good member of the Soviet Party, because she was a very, very strong woman. She was also, you know, had a very high pain threshold, which, you know, let's think of it. If you were going to be doing some kind of double agent dealing and you get caught, high pain threshold is going to come in handy.
Yeah, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Okay, so the possible UFO involvement, possible missile testing, government involvement, different theories as to what might have happened to these. To all intents and purposes, very, very experienced and well-adjusted individuals regarding the type of expedition they're undertaking. So I think, obviously, it's got to be time to look into the other element, which is the Dyatlov Yeti.
Yeah.
The Dyatlov Yeti. Now, of course, this has spread a lot of controversy in its own right, given what it's pertaining to show. At first glance, to me, it looks like somebody in winter clothing in a photograph that's been taken where it's massively out of focus. It's focused on the foreground, and the photographer, whoever they are, doesn't seem to understand the rule of thirds of photography. That's an out of focus photo, so difficult to analyze with any kind of certainty. So is it a Yeti or is it somebody in Arctic clothing? To me, it looks like somebody in Arctic clothing. Nodge?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Dave's absolutely right. That's not a shutter thing. That is a focus thing. So somebody's focused on 3 or 4 feet and just taken that very, very quickly. But I mean, Dave's absolutely spot on. It's somebody in a balaclava and what we would now call a hoodie. That's clearly a human character in winter gear, isn't it?
Steve?
I definitely think it's a member of the group. Like I said earlier on, they were very, very certain of writing journals and diaries about everything they did, from everything they ate to what songs that were being played, who was playing the mandolin, who was cracking jokes. And I'm sure if they would have seen something like that, they would have said, put it down in the diary. Although on the way, they were making like a little newspaper for themselves, like to say, like they're the stars of the paper. And they did write down on one section of it, there is such thing as snowmen, we know. But a lot of people think that was just about them because they were that cold and, they'd been snowed on, that they were calling themselves snowmen.
Yeah, I mean, given it as you look at the figure there in relation to the tree in the background and its surroundings, it just looks completely human, nothing out of the ordinary. Of course, it's difficult to judge scale because we don't know the depth of the of the snow. Obviously, we don't know the height of the tree, but you can pretty much see that that's somebody from about 5.5 to 6 foot there or thereabouts. Hardly what would look like a 9-10 foot beast. Not massively broad shoulders. Head looks pretty much in proportion to the shoulders. Arm length, leg length. It looks pretty much massively in proportion to itself.
And wearing very dodgy East 17 trousers.
What was you going to say, Nodge?
Exactly that. To be honest, I was just about to agree with you in terms of the proportions. Even though it's out of focus, you can tell by the length of the limbs and the size of the head and the posture itself that's clearly probably a male. Yeah.
Which Steve, did you say that there was a theory as to who that was in the photograph?
Yeah, there was an article that I read that they did because he sort of like pranking about and doing stuff, and that Tybo gentleman, the guy whose parents were French immigrants, it was him messing around outside, and somebody just snapped a quick picture of him. But that's who they put it down to.
Okay, just seen an interesting thing in the side chat there by Matthew that most researchers say it's a type 2 Sasquatch, which I find to be an interesting comment there. Type 2 Sasquatch. I think the descriptions of Yeti and big, is it not the Alma in that neck of the woods anyway in Russia? Is the beast not known as the Alma or something thereabouts? I believe. Is that not a white fur covered beast? You have to excuse me ignorance on that because I'm far from a cryptozoologist.
I thought it was called the Menk. I think it was
the Menk. Yeah, there we go. I'm pretty sure Matthew would be able to enlighten us on that. I'll throw a link out in a little bit, Matthew, if you want to come up and chat to the two of us. I'm ignoring myself, the three of us, regarding that. Where do you want to go with it now, Steve? So we covered the picture there as far as the Dyatlov Yeti is pretty much a person milling about, really, isn't it? It's a photograph of one of the team because they're obviously having fun. There's other photographs that massively pertain to the fact that far from being an experience, and I suppose you could put down some of these photographs to naivety, and they could be an experience, but I doubt it. That they were massively looking forward to it in very high spirits and thoroughly enjoying the entire expedition.
Well, the problem I have with that, like I say, that picture, it looks totally human. I mean, even badly faked Yeti photographs look miles better than that. And like I say, if Matthew can come on and perhaps enlighten us with a few things, I'm definitely putting that down as human. But if you want to go off and talk on other things, I've actually got a list, and we've covered some of them, but I have got some of the theories of what happened, and perhaps if we put it out there and if people want to discuss them or join in with it, or you and Nodge, we can do that if you want.
Right, okay, well, give us some of the theories, and let's run through some of the theories that what might have happened and see what people have got to say in the chat and bounce off that. Okay,
so one of the theories is Gulag fugitives, special forces, the Mansi, mushrooms, and contaminated snow. We've covered secret launches, infrasound. We just spoke about the Yeti, a teleportation experiment, lightning strikes ball lightning, the stove, a gravity fluctuation, which we hinted about earlier, karabatic winds, Wolverine, and I don't mean Hugh Jackman, methanol poisoning, a fight on the pass, or Arctic hysteria.
Okay. So quite a list there, really, of possibilities. And there was a massive, there's been more than one investigation into this, hasn't there? It's been looked at by lots of people, outside researchers, as well as the Russian government. So there's been lots of research into this.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the iCard did a book called Dead Mountain that looks at the infrasound thing, which is fascinating because basically his thesis was that Kolak Saikal basically created a vortex that produced infrasound capable of inducing panic, which is, of course, what we saw with our hikers.
Okay, so and you've got people like Natalia Barsagova, who's sort of leading civilian-based investigations in various newspapers that have been reporting. The Komsomolskaya Pravda magazine has released lots of different articles about the Dyatlov Pass incident, but it really only became known to the wider public in 1990 when a retired official sort of released an account about it, and it sparked curiosity.
Well, like you say, it came to the public's eye around 1990, but people in the know of stuff had sort of followed it from probably the late 70s with articles which had been put through in magazines like Fate and stuff like that. But it was never anything which you could say was properly researched. It was just like, oh, by the way, did you realise these 9 people went missing on a mountain? And that was the type of thing that you got. Pretty much similar with like with Roswell, when it sort of came to to the fore in the 80s. But if you actually look through from 1947 onwards, you can see that it has been mentioned in certain things, but not to its full capabilities.
No, I mean, a local journalist at the time was actually barred from filing reports on the incident, and it pretty much stayed like pretty much downplayed until a novel was released, which had a much happier ending than the actual truth of it. That the hurricane force wind blew one of the girls down the slope and trapped her and forced the others to rush down to try and help her. And Dyatlov made it back to the tent and died, and the rest of them find shelters in a trapper's hut. And Dyatlov is indeed a hero because he's the only one who passes away, but the rest of them survive and are in find shelter in a trapper's hut, like I say, which has obviously been poo-pooed because the bodies have been found and so on and so forth. But at the time, again, proving the spread of misinformation that was inherent in the Soviet Union.
Definitely. I mean, all you got to do is look at anything. Even back to the UFO reports at the time around the nuclear shelters and stuff like nuclear missile sites. It's all played down, and why should this be any different? But what you've got to look at is why has it been played down?
Well, in January 1990, a former Communist Party head of the town near the Dyatlov Pass wrote a response to a newspaper article about like supposed UFO sightings in the area, I believe, and describing what happened to the skiers, and saying that the holes in the tent were made by falling debris from a rocket test. And that same the paper later published a story in which Lev Ivanov, the lead investigator in the 1959 inquiry, was quoted as saying the students were killed by a UFO. So the lead investigator in the actual inquiry of that year was known to have made the claim that they were killed by a UFO.
He's actually said while he was up there doing the investigations with his team, they saw these orange spheres while they were up there. And he was told on 3 separate occasions by the higher-ups that he must not talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're saying obviously all the ones were the rumours that they were killed by the indigenous people, which like the Yakut and Tungus tribes were nomadic tribes as well in the area. And
they interrogated them, though, didn't they, Dave?
And
carried out a thorough investigation, and all of them, Mansi maintained, and probably with some justification, that they were entirely innocent, and actually the post-mortems showed that there'd been no sign of physical struggle or violent conflict.
No, there was no soft tissue damage. And they did sort of say like, oh, well, it could have been these Mensi for the simple reason they sort of like come on their land and they don't like that. So they went around and not only did they kill them, but they robbed them. Well, 1, no, they didn't kill them. 2, there was none of the articles from the tent missing. And the Mensi people thought, it's okay to kill, but you don't steal from dead people. So that wouldn't have happened anyway. And also, if you look in the journals of the people who were in the Dyatlov team, they actually mentioned in there that the first night on that mountain, when they met the Mensi, they were actually invited round to take tea with them. They were invited as part of the group.
Well, Lev Ivanov, like I said, who's lead investigator during the 1959 inquiry, has also said that the students' injuries were because of a heat ray or strong energy field that is completely unknown to us, to end quote.
Yeah, but again, I think in that case, it was imagination running away with him, because 1, if it was a heat ray, why did it not affect everybody the same way? why did they suffer from hypothermia when you're getting like God knows tremendous amount of heat at you. I don't know where that quote has come from, where that it's been put down. I say all I know from that gentleman is that he and his team had seen spheres that night and was not allowed to actually say anything about it.
Yeah,
Sorry, Nodge.
I was going to say, Dave, another thing about the Mansi thing is it's too easy and too lazy for established authorities to blame Indigenous peoples, when actually Indigenous peoples are usually the very last groups of people who would do anything like that. One, because they usually have very high standards, but the other thing is because they know what sort of repercussions would ensue. So I think that theory about the local people is probably the most feeble explanation of all of them, really.
Okay, well, and Yuri Yudin himself, who was the member who turned back due to ill health, his belief, he said this to his girlfriend before he died, apparently, that his friends saw something they shouldn't have seen and were forced at gunpoint to fabricate a scene to confuse investigators and then left to die.
Well, I'd love to, again, how would he know that? And when he left the group, he actually met up with family elsewhere and spent the rest of like that winter holiday while the break was on with his family doing a little bit of geology, and like I say, just spent time chewing the fat and drinking with his family. And then when he turned back up at the university, that was the first he'd heard about the group being late. So I don't know where that would actually come from, that he would know that they would be forced to reenact a situation.
And Steve, we just keep coming back to this thing about Lyudmila Dubinina's injuries. I mean, these trauma injuries were consistent with the velocities of a very high-speed car crash, so they wouldn't have been inflicted by casual violence or a fall or anything else, Not
at all.
Okay, so the possibility that like casual violence inflicted by the military, or like you say, the Mensi, which has been like absolutely ruled out. I believe that when there was a later investigation or documentary made about this, that particular tribe were absolutely more than welcoming to the people that went to see them. In fact, I think this might have been, has this been covered on what's the name of it? Destination Truth or something like that. I believe that this has been covered by a paranormal stroke mystery team has done a documentary on this, and they were massively welcomed, if anything, rather than ignored and pushed out of the area.
Well, these people, Dave, they're a little bit like the herders in the Arctic Circle in Sweden. They're basically reindeer herders. So they're not people who are manically territorial. They're people who are fairly transient, and they're used to traversing the area. So they're not what you would call a hostile or territorial in any way,
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of possibilities, but no absolutes. Obviously, if we were dealing with absolutes, then this wouldn't be a mystery. It would be just a case. But lots of different things being said by people that claim to have been there. One of them, including Yuri Yudin, as you say, that he came away from that due to ill health and then spent time with his family. So where these people would garner this kind of information from has to be hearsay and legend, given how tight information was spread around the Soviet Union, indeed only up until the early 1990s, and even now. As a culture, it's slowly becoming more vocal about what goes on within its own borders. But for the most part, and especially during the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, everybody would have been very tight-lipped. So you can only assume that a lot of people have got a very overactive imagination regarding what went on and own theories about what they think went on rather than what actually did occur.
Do you know one thing that comes out of this, Dave, and Steve? I'd be interested to know what you think of it. There was a young boy called Yuri Kuntsevich who later became head of the Dyatlov Foundation, and he attended 5 of the hikers' funerals, and he recalled that all the skin had a deep brown tan. Have you come across that?
Yeah, he basically turned up for their funeral. He said that the skin was like an orangey colour and the hair had gone like a whitey grey. I mean, come on, we've only got to look at Donald Trump, haven't we, and wonder where that's coming from. But a lot of people have said that the hypothermia can affect the skin colour because it makes the skin cells, they break down and it gives some pigment out of it. And it's the same with the hair, that gives the pigmentation because of the low temperatures. And, you know, I think if there was anything more to be hidden, I don't think they would have had open cask funerals.
No, I think
they did have at the time, but it's consistent with hypothermia damage to skin and hair, especially over the amount of time that they were out there as well.
The other thing, Dave, is that these orange spheres that Steve was talking about before, this was not an isolated incident. There was another group of hikers about 50 kilometers away from that the night before who saw the same orange spheres in the sky, and I think the place was called Ivdel and adjacent areas around it. That was earlier though, but that was a few miles away. But it was exactly the same sort of MO in terms of the objects.
They were actually seen between the months of February straight through to the end of March by people all in the neighbourhood. And of course, you know, more people seeing it, again, it makes you wonder what the hell it was. It's not just like a one-off occurrence on the night that this happened. It must have been happening over a period of time.
But these parachute mines that we were talking about before, this is consistent with the experimental weaponry that we're testing. These weapons were designed to go off in midair, and apparently they would cause a sort of orange cast when they were coming down. So that's a possibility.
Well, they have, like, the actual shell of the balloon itself had a gas which had radioactive isotopes in it. Was it 5 sulfur phosphorus? I may be wrong. You can correct me on that. And these were all let off around the area around there, and Mount Arterton as well. And at some point, they reckon that one of the missiles had gone off, hit this balloon, and that was where it spilled the radioactive content and possibly gave off this glow as well. This stuff as well, when it comes down, and this is where you may be getting this orange in the body as well, if you want to look at it conspiratoriously, is that it breaks down within the body and gives off like a browny, orangey pigmentation as well.
Radiological weapons would have caused that. That's what I was getting at. Radiological weapons, had they been exposed to them, would have caused that sort of orange skin and grey hair. And again, this is not alluding to Donald Trump in any way, but perhaps that's what's to him.
The sad thing is, though, we don't get full access, obviously, to all the autopsy files or anything like that, because there's rumours that you know, some of the internal organs were actually damaged by toxic chemicals, causing pulmonary edema and changes in the heart. The way the dimensions of the heart, some parts were bigger than they should have been. Now that's only rumour again. You know, unfortunately, in some of the line of this business, that's sometimes all we can get: hearsay, rumour, and you know, alternative testimony. And it's just a shame that we can't get the full autopsy reports. But again, like I say, because of the nature of the beast, what we would get, would we actually believe what we were being told anyway?
But,
okay, well, going back to the gentleman who attended the funerals, it was a very unfortunately named individual, Yuri Kuntsevich, who is off the reported, off-quoted research of it, and he's head of the Dyatlov Memorial Fund, funnily enough, stated that the students had been asked by a Western agent named the Mole to photograph a secret missile test, and after doing so, they were murdered by drunken convicts guarding the pass. Then they moved the tent 1.5 kilometers to an impractical place, and that was done by a mop-up team of soldiers, and they had several helicopters.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was alluding to earlier when I put the theories about the Gulag fugitives. There's two trains of thought there. Some people actually thought that perhaps the hikers were thought of as Gulag fugitives and killed by security forces on the top, and then realised the mistake. Or the other one is basically what you just said there, that, you know, these Gulag fugitives sort of got hold of them, and it was good night Vienna from that point.
Yeah. Okay. And Dyatlov's sister, Tatiana Permanova, it's repeated, pretty much vocal about what her parents had been saying at the time when her brother disappeared, and that they were sure that the military was somehow involved. So the family, and like I said, Dyatlov's sister, Tatiana Permanova, has been very vocal about the fact that, as far as they're concerned, the military are massively involved in the death of her brother.
Well, they'd always been worried, hadn't they? For the simple reason, like I said, he was a radio genius. He'd been building radios since about the age of 5 or something like that. So not only was he building up stuff that he could listen to, but he was building stuff that he could broadcast on. And that was the biggest fear of the family, that perhaps he would one day upset somebody, which would bring down either hell and damnation to him or to the rest of the family. And of course, he's a bit out of the way. And if you wanted to get rid of someone, that would be the way to do it.
Okay, so before we start wanging it about between ourselves and the people in the side chat there, and to lend any kind of credence to official explanation, the possibility of severe winds blowing over the dome of the mountain created a calm and vortex street of whirlwinds, which could have possibly produced low-frequency sound that people can't hear, but it vibrates air cells within the ear, causing you an intense psychological discomfort. And that because of that, and especially in the pitch dark, that they could have just become overcome by feelings of fear and panicked. And that's why they run in several different directions, and why the bodies weren't all found together in trying to find a safe place from what's supposed to be an alleged avalanche, of which they're going to be more than au fait with, given the training, as we said before, and the level of experience that they've got. They've run all over the place because they're feeling intense psychological discomfort because of calm and vortex streets producing low frequency vibration, which is affecting them physically. So it's a physiological thing which made them run the way that they did.
Well, I think when Nodge was saying earlier on, like the infrasound, it's a very similar thing. I mean, the Americans use infrasound weaponry to create panic in the enemy, so that they sort of become very disorientated, do things that they wouldn't do. The training that they've had no longer in part because it's took over. And like I say, it's a very similar effect with the karabatic winds as well. It's the kind of thing that would have gone on there would have been totally disorientating to that group, if that would have been the case. But there's evidence to show one way to another that the conditions were not right on that night for the karabatic winds, and also it still doesn't sort of fit in with the kind of damage that was given to the tent either.
No, and the other thing is, any mountaineer will tell you that I'm not referring specifically to this weird, bizarre vortex, the Kármán vortex street, which is basically just swirling wind. That any mountaineer will tell you that they're used to hearing weird things in mountains, because they are very, very strange and mysterious places. And to be honest, no mountaineer or explorer would, they may have a certain physiological reaction, but it probably wouldn't induce that sort of panic.
No, it's an interesting hypothesis, but under scrutiny doesn't hold any kind of ground whatsoever.
No, not really.
Okay, so we've gone through a few things which we think might be possible explanations as to why what went on did go on. I am slightly interested in what Matthew said about some researchers saying that the Dyatlov Yeti was a type 2 Sasquatch. So if you're still out there, let me know, Matthew. What do people in the side chat think? If you want to throw any questions up, I didn't mean to throw a banner out there saying that we're open to questions, so I'll do that now. But feel free to fire any questions towards us or comments. We're always open to that. But certainly I think everybody would agree a very interesting case. Then every and almost all the explanations, official or otherwise, don't really hold a great deal of credence in any way, shape or form, really.
No. Definitely the Soviet authorities, both at the time and afterwards, were too quick to call the group inexperienced, and particularly Dyatlov. I mean, who was an experienced guy? Steve said, for all the reasons that he's alluded to. These people knew what they were doing. They were highly qualified, and to just say that they panicked for no reason and were basically the victims of their own incompetence just doesn't wash.
Okay, well, fire the link out there for you, Matthew, if you want to come up and chat to the three of us about this type 2 Sasquatch and why researchers remotely think that that photograph is indicative of that kind of cryptid. So it's out there for you. I'll wait for you arriving in the basement. Hello there, Grinch. Thanks for joining. So again, the natural elemental conditions, questionable. Military involvement, again, questionable, if not a little bit more likely, to be quite honest. Was it not a nuclear weaponry? Don't know. That's a difficult one to call. But let's we'll bring Matthew in and see what Matthew's got to say to us. Hello, Matthew.
Hey, brother. Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
Hey, Matthew.
Yeah, mate.
Okay.
Hey.
Yeah, we're doing well. So this type 2 Sasquatch that some researchers are calling the Dyatlov Yeti. Can you elaborate upon that for us?
Okay. There's another type 2 that's humanoid like that. That's it. I believe it's either in Finland or Greenland or something like that. In the northern parts of it, and it's called Annie. And supposedly they've been working on interbreeding Sasquatch DNA and human DNA right after World War II. And that a lot of researchers claim that picture is a part of the type 2 genetic Sasquatch. Yeah, it in my opinion, it doesn't have the stereotypical Sasquatch features, the elongated arms, elongated legs, the oblong skull. If you're used to the traditional Sasquatch features, this isn't like that. But if you go with the genetically enhanced versions, it seems to look like Annie. And these type of creatures have been known to speak English and can communicate with humans. That's a 50-50 thing with me. Like, I'm on the fence about it. I don't know. But supposedly they've been working with this DNA since after World War II. It does have the traditional Yeti Sasquatch gripping a tree before it decides to walk off, like you caught it without it knowing. But that can be mimicked by anybody because of all the other encounters, but it kind of goes with this conspiracy theory, that's the only reason why I'm bringing this up, is because the anti-conspiracy theory, the humanoid Sasquatch DNA bloodline, and there's only been 1 or 2 pictures taken of Annie, and from the pictures that I've seen of her or I don't know. They've just called her Annie. Called it Annie. And from the 2 pictures that I've seen of Annie, it seems the same structure build as this. The Yetis don't have long fur like typical Sasquatch do. They have sleeker, more waterproof fur because they're dealing in the snow and wet climates all the time. It's like deer fur or moose fur or elk. They have short, waterproof fur that the water just drips off of it. And I believe in this, it may be a short-haired version of that kind of creature.
Okay, well, you with mentioning Annie, what time period or when was the first reports of Annie started to come into the cryptid field, or even the pseudoscientific community for that matter? When did these reports? Where did they originate from, and what time period?
It originated, like I said, from Finland or Iceland, in the northern parts of it, in the snow-covered areas, and the first sightings of it were told by mouth, but it started, I want to say between 52 and 55 when it started. But the pictures didn't come out until I want to say 72 or 73. That was when the first picture was taken. Then the secondary picture was taken in I want to say 85 was the second picture of it. And there hasn't been a picture since.
Right, so the last known picture of Annie taken in 1985, did you say?
Yeah, 85. Sorry, my window unit is messing up. I'm in the house.
Yeah, no problem at all. Have you two guys got any questions for Matthew or anything to say?
I'm just wondering how something genetically modified, whatever, would migrate over to the Ural Mountains. That's my bone of contention with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've heard that that's not really my field of expertise, but from what I've heard and what I've researched, there's a hidden biologist, some kind of research facility, like bioengineering research facility in the area where Annie was created, and they have literally put these creatures in. They've put one of these man-made creatures in each country.
So just to sort of follow this up, do you know of any other sort of imagery that would describe this? Because I was interested to hear what you would, your deliberations on this photo, because it, like you say, it doesn't really accord with that kind of description, does it? But
right, yeah, these creatures are more human-like, and the reason why they made them more human-like is so that humans, if they see them in the woods or anything, they will pass them off as a human, like how y'all are passing this one off as a person in a, either, winter down, something like that. They have genetically engineered these creatures into the areas that they put them at. So if a normal bypasser or anything sees them, they're just going to pass them off as a human wearing a hoodie or a long coat or whatever.
And to be honest with you, in my naivety, that's exactly what I'd concluded. But yeah,
right. And if you saw it, like if you were walking in the woods and you saw this person, you wouldn't pay it any other attention. You wouldn't even give it a second look, and that's what this theory is on them, is that they're trying to make these creatures more
human.
Yeah, more human, but give them the special traits that Sasquatch have to be able to survive in any situation, and make them the AKA super soldier.
Can I just ask something? If this is the case, that they're trying to get them to blend in, I know damn well that if I was, I don't know, middle of the Urals, on top of a mountain in God knows where else, and the snow was falling, and then I looked over into the distance and I saw some guy there who was perhaps semi-naked or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I wouldn't sort of go, oh, that's all right, it's just a semi-naked guy walking around the mountains. I think I'd be asking a few more questions at that point. I wouldn't just sort of pat it off as though like, oh, he's all right.
Well, that's the difference between us and the majority of the world. The majority of the world, the person is just going to look at that out of their peripheral vision and go off, because they're going to be like, they won't ask that question, why is there another person out here in the middle of the boondocks? Because you're out there in the middle of the boondocks. You know what I mean?
They're not going to ignore it, though, are they? I mean, come on. I mean, you see something like that, you're either going to go screaming, going, oh, my God, there's a semi-naked man running around the mountain. I mean, we ask questions because...
Hey, come on, Steve. We're from Manchester. It's a regular occurrence around here.
Yeah, Old Clough.
Well, it's either that or... Well, it's either you pass it off saying that it's another human, or you take the ridicule of the rest of the population calling you psycho, or that you've gone mad.
I don't know. I'm really. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do believe that he's Sasquatch type phenomena, but I really can't buy into this hybrid side of it. I mean, especially like super soldiers and stuff like that. I mean, we sort of really going down a very dodgy path there, I think.
Yeah. I can buy into.
I mean, I'm the same way as you. I'm a natural believer, like, of the real Sasquatches. I'm just telling you the theory that's out there. It's not me saying I believe this. It's me telling you that there is other conspiracy theories on the Sasquatches, and this is one of the pictures that, like the iconic Annie, that is supposed to be a humanoid experiment. I don't believe that there's some magical biological bioengineering facility out there that has stolen Sasquatch DNA or is milking some male, some alpha male Sasquatch to test tube breed human Sasquatch hybrid babies, but I mean, it could happen, but I don't believe it. I believe in my Sasquatch. I believe in my Harry and the Hendersons stereotypical Sasquatch. But, bringing up that, yes, it could be a human. It could be, a human at the right place at the right time, and then the other person got scared, had a camera, thought they could make a few bucks, but I'm just opening your eyes to other theories out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it's belief in Sasquatch, Yeti, Yahweh, Gugway, that kind of thing is something a bit more alluded to the picture that I'm showing now, that kind of thing for the most part.
Yes, that the oblong shaped skull, the extended arms, the extended legs, the semi hunchbacked walk. I mean, that lumbering walk that it has of somebody that, is full of strength. That's my Sasquatch. The other one, there may be something going on somewhere. You don't know about our government. There's so many things that happens with the government. Who knows that there isn't some research facility out there that is trying to capitalize on a Sasquatch DNA? it's a what if scenario, but it could happen. I mean, look what y'all are covering right now. I mean, it are the governments from all over the world are secretive. They will kill anybody. They don't care who you are or what you do. If they want you dead, they will kill you. And who says that they don't put the money into these research facilities to try to make this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's worth being mentioned the sheer amount of things that are alleged to be the result of government experimentation and secrecy, black projects, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And I
mean,
completely
we've tried to send people into the past and into the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I am 100% convinced that this particular photograph is a human being, and I know that you know, like you say, some researchers are saying that it's an Annie or a type 2 Sasquatch, but to me, regardless of what medical conditions you might have regarding your eyes, that looks like somebody taken in a badly focused photograph, probably due to cold fingers, not wanting to resolve the image correctly through the viewfinder. I don't know what kind of cameras they were using at the time, but I don't imagine they were large format cameras just because of bulk and size.
Things like Leica and Zorki rangefinder type things, Dave. Those were
right.
prevalent at the time.
Yeah, they're not going to be big Hasselblad large format cameras, are they?
Dave, yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm 100% with y'all on that's a human to me. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, I'm just putting out that theory because to me, absolutely. it has way too many humanoid traits on it to be a Sasquatch or even a genetic modified science experiment. You know, it's a human, but there's about 100 cryptid researchers out there that all agree that it's a type 2, and no matter what you say, no matter what you do, they will not change their opinion on it, no matter what. And those are the people that you have to deal with in this field. They won't open their mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Understood. Well, interesting anyway that there's researchers out there that think that's a type 2, and you're saying that because of that photograph, they're saying that looking at that photograph, in their opinion, that is a type 2.
Yes, because the only reason why they think it's a type 2 is because of the stance. The stance of it and it holding onto the tree. That is an iconic type 2 pose that is caught off guard.
Absolutely understood. Have you, Nodge, or you, Steve, got any questions for Matthew before we press on?
To be honest, no. For the simple reason, like Matthew says, he's got his Sasquatch. I've got mine. I do think that is a guy just out there in the cold with his badly photographed pic, and I don't know. I find the rest of it to be pretty far. And this is a guy, you know, sort of studies UFOs. For me to say it's pretty far fetched, it's pretty far fetched.
Nodge?
I'm in the same boat, Dave. As you know, I'm a photographer, and I recognise an out of focus photograph from about, I don't know, 30 yards of somebody of human size and proportions. I don't disagree with Matthew with regard to possibilities of Sasquatch or hybridization, but I just don't think in this case this image actually fits that particular theory.
So
Yeah.
all four of us are in agreement with that one. Then that photograph is pretty much looks like a human, and I think it needs to be. Yeah, it needs to be stipulated that Matthew come on saying that it was other researchers that claim that that was a type 2 and not himself.
Yeah.
It's not me saying that. I'm just saying that other researchers are dead serious about claiming it as a type 2. But no, it's a human.
Absolutely. Okay, is there any questions out in the chat that anybody would like to put towards Matthew before we press on? If there's anything you want to say or ask, stick it in the side chat. This is the side chat's in a completely different place than where we're at now, though. We may do the Rendlesham Forest thing at some stage. It's massively covered, but then I suppose a lot of the subjects are, aren't they? But we may do one on Rendlesham Forest. But has anybody in the side chat got any questions they want to put towards Matthew? If so, let us know. But yeah, you can quite clearly see by looking at that photograph that to me is 100% proportioned human figure holding onto a tree. You can even see the collar if you look on the right arm, which would be the figure's left arm. You can see the black, it looks like a collar or cuff rather. You can see the lighter tone, like the jackets of a lighter color than the trousers. Almost looks like it might be wearing a balaclava. You can, and almost like a darker area around the waist, as if that might be a belt or some kind of webbing or something along that line. It just looks to me like somebody wearing clothes in a balaclava with a bomber jacket kind of thing on. It just looks completely like a human being to me.
I have a World War II tank, deep snow or harsh weather climate balaclava, and it covers around my whole entire face just like that does.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, I mean, it does extend out the back, like that one, like in the picture, the back seems to extend out a little bit more to keep that air pocket, to keep your head and your face warm. So yeah, I believe it's somebody that, that had some, army surplus or whatever, like deep weather army surplus on, and was out in the woods, maybe hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. It says, to me, whichever way you look at it, that's a human being in a badly focused photograph. And I suppose you could make comment that it's badly focused because it was taken in haste. I don't know about that. I just think it's a badly taken photograph. Full stop. That
Dave, just coming on back onto sort of photographic evidence. Another thing, be interested to get Steve's take on of this is that the photographs, of the tent, what was left of the tent, allegedly show, and this sort of ties in with what the authorities said about the inexperience of the group. That I think we've all agreed that they were an experienced group. Photographs of the tent actually show that it was erected incorrectly, which is something that an experienced group would never have done. I always find that quite interesting. That you were. So
you're saying it was a group of drunk friends one night saying, "Let's go out and drink and whatever."
Hey, that sounds like the Rendlesham Forest excuse. But there you
I was just thinking about Rendlesham when you said it, Steve. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I also do bushcraft and survival. Like, from what y'all were showing, in any survival situation, if you know the outdoors and everything, and if there was an avalanche that was going to happen, every like survivalist in Canada and Alaska, even in Russia, they say if an avalanche happens, you're supposed to cover yourself in the tent, spread yourself out, and when the snow covers over you, it makes a ball so you can have an air pocket in there so you can dig yourself out. And that's what amazes me, that these people out there in the middle of avalanche snow weather, and they didn't take any kind of training or know just the basics going out there.
So Matthew, as an outdoorsman, then you would agree with us that the notion of the Russian authorities saying that these guys were inexperienced and incompetent just doesn't wash, does it?
No. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, it can go that they were probably just a bunch of friends taking a weekend trip out or whatever, and were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the way that they took off running in multiple directions, like,
yeah,
you're not going to outrun an avalanche. No matter, that's just human knowledge. And in my opinion, yeah, it probably was just a wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, yeah, there could have been other things that happened that made the avalanche happen, but I don't know. I don't know too much on the story. But I do know that iconic picture, that iconic Sasquatch, aka a Sasquatch picture, because that's been floating around cryptozoologists for years.
So the Dyatlov Yeti is the picture you're referring to. Again, bringing up the map of the disposition of the bodies as they were found. Of course, as I said earlier, not all at the same time. Some of them were found 4 months later after the snow had thawed. And the topography of the region, which we now know as Dyatlov's Pass, not congruent with the flow of what you consider to be an avalanche, in fact diagonal to the direction of flow which would follow the fissures of the mountain face down the brook and the Lozhva river, as you can see there.
Okay, let me ask you something. Was the tent still in the same spot, or was it dragged away also?
The tent was allegedly in exactly the same place, showing various signs of disrepair. Steve, you know a few bits about that, don't you? The state of the tent.
It was definitely in the same place that it was pitched. I mean, there was even rumours to say that the stove that was in there had caused a fire the day before and it set light to one of the jackets, because in some of the photographs you could see a burnt jacket. But again, this group of people had used a similar tent before, knew how to pitch it. They also used snow on the outside of it to actually keep it in place, and also to protect it from some of the the extreme conditions that were outside. And as you know, if you actually put snow around something, it does create like a layer of insulation as well to keep the heat in. So they did know what they were doing. And I think you were sort of like alluding to there, perhaps, if the avalanche did come down, it shifted the tent. But this was also part of one of when the Russians came out and said, yes, it was an avalanche, then people did come forward saying, no, it couldn't have been. This wasn't an area where an avalanche was likely to happen. If it did, it would have swept down one way and sort of swirled around the other and totally missed them. And again, this would be consistent with the fact of
just a topographical area.
Yeah, he was a really good hiker, knew his terrain and stuff like that, and he would know where and how to pitch this tent.
Yeah, and that photograph, that final photograph of the remains of the tent shows that it had been erected incorrectly, which would suggest that somebody's gone back and reproduced the scene for whatever reason, because quite frankly, experienced outdoorsmen would not have put a tent up wrongly. It's just
right.
The thing there,
okay, just about my experience. Okay, is this the tent picture?
Yeah.
Okay. From I'm no like extreme cold survivalist or anything, but I've been through training and stuff like that. The way that it looks at was the snow was piled up on top of it, because if the avalanche came through it, even with the snow barrier on the ground keeping it in place, it would still rip through that, because it's not a canvas tent, it's a polyethyl tent. If it was a canvas tent, it would have flattened down. But that, because it has poles and everything in it, the poles would have been ripped up through it, and the snow would not have collapsed it into a U shape. Plus, everything on the inside of it that was heavy. You said there was a stove in it, right?
Yeah.
The force of the impact would have pushed the stove through the tent and ripped it out. So the stove would have been in a different area than where the tent is.
Can I just make an observation though?
Yeah.
If we were looking at that as like a crime scene where we turned up 20 minutes later, perhaps we could sort of discuss that in the way. But the thing is, this was like a couple of weeks after the incident actually happened, where they'd been.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like the day after.
No, not at all. No. They were a couple of weeks overdue before they actually sent out the teams to look at, for a search party.
I think some of that photographic evidence afterwards, Steve, was staged because, I mean, we've spoken about this before, what the American police would call an orgy of evidence. To me, they just found a convenient site that they wanted to explain away as an avalanche, and the photograph shows that so tidily and so neatly, it can't possibly be true to me.
The only problem I have with that is that, they did say that.
Hey, Dave, can you bring that picture up again? Sorry, I thought I saw something in the.
Yeah, just hang on. Go on, Steve. Finish what you was going to say.
Yeah. Sorry.
Dyatlov was supposed to have made his way back towards the tent. Now we don't know whether he did get there. And then went back to try and find, other members of the party. But if he did get there and he did attempt to sort of put the tent in some kind of condition to go back out, it might not have been put together properly as it should have been. And he was perhaps making something makeshift so that he and other members of the party could have survived.
Right.
Yeah. Because nobody.
Okay, you say, sorry, go on, Nodge. Go on, Nodge.
I was just going to say, because I mean, one thing that's obvious but very unusual about the case is all 9 died. All 9. What are the odds?
Yeah,
absolutely. And you say that you see something in that photograph that you think's worth mentioning, Matthew. Do you want to go ahead with that?
Yeah. Okay. Do y'all know the angle of the way that the avalanche came through?
Well, this is it. They don't know if it actually was an avalanche, because according to the Russian investigation said it was an avalanche, but experts who had been in that area, who'd been up there, there's been 100 different teams up since then, have said that area is not susceptible to an avalanche.
Absolutely.
So there's no.
Okay. Yeah. Because what I see is, on the right hand side, if you're that you're seeing, there's a whole entire snow mound buildup, coming all the way around to where the men are, but the complete rest of the area is flat snow. So if there was an avalanche there would be more mounds of snow around the whole entire area than in just that one spot. That's why I was asking, if it was an avalanche and it came down, the push of the snow is what made this mound, and it wouldn't have crushed in the tent in a U shape. The U-shaped crush means that it came down at the side, not from behind the tent.
The problem with that is, though, that if it was an avalanche with such a force, the tent wouldn't even be in the same place that it should have been. It would have been moved. And even if the tent itself would have somehow managed to cling on to whatever purchase that it could have held there, then all the other belongings inside and outside of the tent would have been swept away.
Would have been screwed around everywhere too.
Moved as well, which they didn't. So this is more evidence to say that, no, it couldn't have been an avalanche for the simple reason nothing moved.
Yeah,
You're right. That's what that's what I'm saying. Like if it was an avalanche, there would be more mounds of snow everywhere. Even if it was a week later. And this whole entire terrain is completely flat except for this one area that has the mound built up close to where these men are.
I think, given the fact that as you look at the photograph on the right-hand side, you can see the contours of the actual topography of the ground, that you would expect the snow to have been funneled in that direction and to have built up down there, but it looks relatively clear. In fact, you can even see what looks like rocks protruding through the snow cover, which is obviously light for that to be the case. There's very little, if any, build-up in the middle distance, in the right, near where that orb kind of thing is in the picture. Very little snow build-up there, even though you can obviously see that is on a declination going down in towards the valley.
Yeah, and again,
Thank you, Dave. You have better words than me.
Yeah, wouldn't do that.
But that's what I was trying to point out. Like the rest of the landscape is completely flat and unmoved. Like the rocks and everything that's there, it does not look like an avalanche scene at all.
Okay, I mean, one thing that does need to be pointed out, that hasn't been pointed out, and how much this affects what people think about it, maybe a completely moot point, is the fact that there were 9 pairs of boots lined up against the wall of the tent. So they went out barefoot. So they obviously left in a hurry. That isn't open to conjecture, unless, of course, we believe that the boots were put back in place after the event, suggesting that there was some kind of cover up and that pictures were staged and so on and so forth, as Nodge alluded to a few minutes ago.
Which would sort of,
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just saying, which would also sort of knock it into the head about the avalanche, because I'm sure boots would sort of move a lot easier than the rest of the equipment what was there if an avalanche hit it with such force.
Yes. I mean, even the tent tie down rig in the front is too loose to be stable. It would keep its tension if it was pushed. You know what I mean? If an avalanche pushed it, that tie down rigging right there would be taut. It wouldn't be loosely hanging the way it is in the front.
I think you also worth bearing in mind is the fact that as we're looking at objects there that obviously don't contain the same amount of mass or weight as a human body, even some of the smallest members of the team, we're led to believe that these members of the team, such and such, were swept down diagonally, not following the contours of the land, mind you, swept diagonally down this slope over varying distances, suffering totally, completely different traumatic injuries, leaving skin on trees, suggesting that they were trying to climb these trees. But the contents of a tent and the actual structure of the tent has been completely left. But these objects haven't been moved too. I find that highly unlikely that somebody that might be able to weigh 100 pounds has been swept down a hill, but a boot that might weigh just 1 pound hasn't been moved at all.
I'm sorry, but this is more of a cryptid cover up than anything else, I believe. I mean, just the way that the bodies were. And you said there was skin on the trees where they were trying to climb the trees to get away from something, correct?
Allegedly, there is no evidence to suggest that that is what they were trying to do, escape from anything, just that there was skin found on trees.
So, I mean, I've read plenty of Sasquatch reports and everything where campers have camped in the middle of the Adirondack mountains and have went missing, and their whole entire campsite was ripped apart. You said that the tent was ripped open to get out?
Yeah. There was two different kinds of rips. One purported to show a type of rip that somebody would do if they were trying to look out the back of it, and then they did like slash rips in a cross length way, which would enable them to get out of the back.
So that means something was coming in through the front for them to have to do that, because
the front was still tied together.
Well, I'm saying if they were experienced, outdoorsmen, they would not destroy their tent to get away from, say, a grizzly bear or whatever, unless it's coming in from the front. That's the only time that you would really rip open your tent to get out of it.
But there was no evidence to say that anything did attempt to get in at the front, because it was still tied down. There was no marks on it or anything.
Oh, well, let me posit this forward then, is that being the case, and if something to come in from the front, and let's take it from the so-called alleged point of what they've been saying, because I've seen some comments in the side chat which have alluding to the fact that people believe the government line, which I completely don't, given that none of it stands up. Is if you were to pitch a tent, and you're an outdoorsman, these people have got a certain level of training and understanding of taking on board this adventure before they even set out. And people need to realize that they weren't beginners, they weren't novices, they understood what they were doing. Okay, now if you were in that position, what is the likelihood that you would position the front of your tent towards an oncoming avalanche or uphill? Where would you position the entrance to your tent, bivouac, however, shelter?
If you're that expert, you'd sight it away from any likely areas anyway, wouldn't you? Let's be honest.
Yes. Yeah, you check for widowmakers, trees that may break or whatever during heavy winds. You put your tent in the safest spot possible. If you could. And I'm not seeing any cliff faces or anything like this, the best place to put the tent would have been underneath a cliff, overhanging cliff, because if an avalanche came over, it would give that whole entire archway to fall down and not come onto your tent. So, but you're out in the open, and the best way to do that is to find the least steepest part of the hill and make your entrance to the bottom of it so you can try to get out before the rush of the snow. You don't want to open it up and the snow coming in front of you. You want it to going back away from it.
Okay, so Steve, being as how the level of research you normally do, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but is there any indication at all as to the orientation of the tent in regards to the topography of the mountain at all? Do you know? Was it facing uphill?
It was facing downhill.
Okay,
I can say on that.
Okay, so just try and give it a second in between chatting, otherwise we get a heterodyne and it just cancels out the audio. So are you saying that the entrance to the tent was facing downhill?
As far as I'm aware, yeah. I haven't got any details of the actual findings on it. It's really difficult to find that. Again, you sort of ask, well, why is that so difficult to find out how it was?
Because they don't put that kind of information in.
But again, whichever way you look at this, it's definitely indicative of somebody wanting to make sure that they needed to get out the back way and checking before they did. I really don't think that if it was an avalanche where time is of the essence, that you would spend that fraction of a second or a few seconds just making a little hole just to have a look out of it and then say, oh, right, come on, let's get out of here now. If you honestly thought there was an avalanche coming down, you would get either out the front way, which was possibly quicker, because all you had to do was undo a couple of ties, then look round, get a knife, make your first hole to have a look through it, and then cut it through. But again, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's what... Sorry, Dave.
Go on.
I'm saying, yeah. Any outdoorsman has a knife on their side. If it's sharp enough, it takes 1 second to pull it out, pop it through the tent, slice down, look. You know, if it's coming from behind you, and you ain't got time to unzip the front, get out, go around, look, you know, cut open the tent, because it's going to be useless if it is an avalanche. You know, cut it open, make a peephole, look, then get out the front. But them running without even putting their boots on, it doesn't matter if they they didn't even have to tie them up. Just putting their boots on in that snow would make it so much harder to run. I mean, you're barefooted. You would sink if even in 3 inches of snow. You know how hard of a trek that would be to try to escape from an avalanche?
Well, can I just point that picture that we had up previously? If you notice, just up where the tent is, it looks like a crucifix sticking up. That's
what I saw too.
Yeah, it's one of the ice axes. That now they're not. I wouldn't say that they're not ridiculously heavy, and obviously it's been sort of jammed into the ground. So you would think if an avalanche had come along, even if it hadn't swept it away, it would have knocked it off kilter than being stood up straight.
Yes, and that's what I was saying too. It does not look like an area that an avalanche would hit. There's too many perfect standing items. You know, if it can throw 9 human beings, you know, it doesn't matter if it could throw a human 5 feet. If it can throw a human 5 feet, it's going to throw a 2-pound pickaxe, you know, 15 to 30 feet.
Yeah, it's going to be shifting.
It's not going to be standing up straight.
Right, okay, like I said, try and leave a gap, otherwise we just get heterodyne on the audio, which just cancels one another out. So all that being said, the avalanche theory, there's many reasons why that doesn't hold up. I mean, the fact that it's not the region isn't even known for avalanches. The photographic evidence doesn't suggest avalanches. The location of the bodies doesn't suggest avalanches. The topography of the ground doesn't suggest that the damage that was done or the alleged position of the bodies suggest avalanches. It's unlikely that it was an avalanche. And given the photograph that I've got on screen there, if this is bodies being recovered, because this is supposed to be a photograph of the recovery operation, there's government officials there. The need for government officials to be at that location when we are led to believe it was an act of nature which killed some students that were just out hiking on the side of a mountain. Is that likely? Would the government want to be involved? Would Communist Party officials be involved? What's the likelihood of that? What's your thoughts on that, Nodge?
Sorry, Dave, I was on mute. Yeah, the thing I've always believed about this is an experienced group. They knew what they were doing, and I happen to think that I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but the authorities definitely either came to the wrong conclusions about what happened, or they covered it up, because they again and again and again they said that the group were inexperienced, the leader was incompetent, but that plainly wasn't the case. Either they've stumbled on something and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and saw the wrong thing, or something extraordinary happened and they've gone back and essentially just sort of whitewashed over the whole thing. That's what I've always thought.
Okay.
I can throw in my 2 cents if you want to hear it.
Yeah, throw it in by all means. Go.
I mean, okay, I don't know how well you are with cryptids or whatever, but there was a case of a dogman attack called LBL. All right. And that was where a family went to a kind of like a RV park to camp before anything else. And a dog man supposedly slaughtered the whole entire family. And that's the only case that has had government officials go to, and they've put it under deep wraps and everything also. That's why I'm saying they may have ran into something that, like what you said, wrong place at the wrong time, and they saw something or were killed by something that the government that wanted information or to find the whereabouts of whatever it was. I mean, that's my only idea on why government officials would be at this area.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, but I mean, obviously, the fact that it's a mystery and that we're discussing it means that all the theories about it, according to conjecture, beyond any kind of a shadow of a doubt, and that a lot of things don't match up. They don't make any sense, and probably more evidence to suggest that something's being hidden rather than things being revealed, as subsequent investigations have tried to lead us believe. Would you agree with that, Steve?
I certainly. If you look at anything of this case, it just doesn't add up. It really does not add up at all. I mean, you and I, over the years, we've investigated a great many different things, and sometimes you can sort of start piecing things together, look at pieces of the jigsaw and think this fits here and this fits there. This doesn't. I think it does still stink of a conspiracy.
Nodge, what are your thoughts?
I agree entirely. I've always thought that the Soviet authorities definitely covered something up. Personally, I think that they are more likely to have stumbled on some kind of weapon testing or technology that they shouldn't have encountered, and perhaps just accidentally were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Could be wrong, but there's a reason that the Soviet authorities have accused, the local population and the group themselves of doing something wrong when there's no evidence to show that is the case. And personally, I think the Soviet authorities definitely. I think Steve's absolutely right. There's definitely some sort of cover up. The question is why. Now the fact that these orange orbs were seen in the night skies, not just on the night, but also on other nights close to this site within 30-40 kilometers would support the hypothesis that there was some sort of weapons testing going on. The Urals have always been used by the Russian military for testing, and I suspect that's what they've inadvertently stumbled upon.
Can I just quickly throw something into the mix? Does anybody know how, like we have this thing, and in America it's a similar thing, that when you want to keep something quiet, you can sort of have it locked for, 20 years, 25 years, 40 years, 75 years. How long is it that the Russians can keep sort of thing under wraps? Because what I'm thinking is if you look at what the official line was earlier this year, that it's an avalanche, pretty much in a roundabout way matches what they said back in 1959, where they said it was an insurmountable force basically, which got it. Is this something that has been thrown forward this year just to sort of say, right, well, this is closed now up until so many years in the future when it can be revisited again, just to make it look as though we do take it seriously and we have had a look into it, and then a few years down the line they say we'll look into it again, that way appeasing the public, but still being able to keep their hand on it to hide things as much as they want.
What you mean, like the 30 years rule type thing?
Yeah, it's just something that I was thinking of before, thinking if you can keep doing that and ponying up every so often within a so-called answer to everything, then nobody's going to approach it then, because you can turn around and say, well, we'll look at this again in so many years' time.
That is true. The one thing I looked into, Steve, and it's been said that initially the Soviet authorities definitely suppressed some of the files regarding the group's disappearance, particularly the results of the post-mortem. But even some of the former critics of the Soviet regime afterwards have admitted that most of the Dyatlov files have been released in some manner by the end of the 1980s.
Well, the majority of them have. There's still some which are in secret archives somewhere. And like I say, there was 10 rolls of film found. Only the results of 4 rolls have actually been released. So you're still talking 6 rolls of film there that we haven't seen a photograph from at all. Could that be tied in with what was discussing earlier about meeting up with American CIA agents to swap over, some kind of photographic evidence, or were they doing stuff for the KGB, looking for stuff that they could pin on the Americans? There's just so many loose ends here that it's like in Scooby-Doo, innit? You don't know who it is till the end, and we're not going to get to the end.
Yeah.
I have a question for y'all. How was the bodies found? Were they contorted in pain to as if like a avalanche did hit them and the snow contorted them, or did they die flat on their face, or how did the bodies?
Just let him finish, Steve.
Sorry.
How were the bodies found? Like, what condition?
There's an example on the screen.
Okay, so right there shows you that is not an avalanche death scene. An avalanche scene, if they were out, their bodies would be contorted, not just laying straight like they were literally frozen in fear.
Some were actually found in the fetal position. Some were on the knees with the backside up into the air. Some were literally face up and chest up close to a wall. Some were actually huddled together as though it was like either for comfort or for heat. They were all found in different ways.
Okay, so it seems like they all rated a mass hysteria. Like,
yeah, it's like a random panic. Yeah. So they must have seen something that put a great deep of fear into them, other than secret missile testings or something like that. I'm sorry. I still go with a cryptid theory that there has been other people that have been found dead in the woods with the fear still on their face, dead. Possibly, Matthew, but do you know what? If somebody had sort of let off these parachute devices that the Soviets were experimenting with, believe me, I'd run. I'll tell you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I could understand that too, but I don't know. I'm just saying there has to be something more. Something. It looks like an explosion happened. Like that looks like something he was thrown against it, not just like clinging to it.
Right, which is why I've always gone with the parachute mine thing, because apparently the explosive impact of them would explain the severe injuries found on Ludmila Dubinina's body, who undergone injuries consistent with a high-speed car crash, not being crushed by snow. So
really,
more explosions, certainly.
See, I did not know that. What other injuries was there on the bodies?
Well, 3 died of trauma and 6 died of hypothermia. But the two main injuries to Dubinina and Zolotarov, they lost they lost body parts. Dubinina had no eyes, no tongue, part of her lips were gone. Huge chest fractures and huge trauma.
I mean, the eyes and the tongue could be nature itself, scavengers that came and, picked it, because it was how many days before they were found? Weeks?
Good couple of weeks.
Yeah, so, I mean, carrion birds, foxes, whatever, I mean, they go for the easiest parts of the body first. If their mouth was open, that tongue is a good muscle and a good source of protein for wild animals.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Just trauma injuries that have always mystified me. I don't know what you think, Steve, but
well, one of the theories that was put forward, because apparently they are prevalent in that area, was wolverines.
Yeah, they scavenge.
So yeah, it's, I mean, one of the theories was that a wolverine had actually tried to get in the front of the tent, got caught up in the tie-ups for the front door part of it, started spraying inside the tent, made the place stink. That's why they cut the hole in the back. That's why they didn't take any of the clothes out with them, because it was smelling and it was making them sick. But again, I think that's a real long stretch of the imagination. That, I mean,
yeah, Wolverines don't have. I mean, well, in America, Wolverines don't have any stink glands or anything. I mean, they're vicious creatures, but they're like black bears. If you show that you're bigger than it and you make noise, and you said these are wilderness people, like they know the wilderness. They would know how to run off a wolverine, especially if it's just trying to scavenge. If it's not protecting its den, then it will run off because you're bigger than it and it doesn't want to get hurt.
yeah.
well, this was what
I can't go with that theory.
That he was actually caught up in the tie-ups of the front of the tent, and that's what the problem was, that they couldn't get out because it was there. But like I said earlier, there was no markings on the front of the tent. The tie-ups were still there, so that's one theory that I would dismiss straight away. Anyway,
Yeah,
it's one of those that unfortunately it's we're in that situation where as in a lot of
sorry, but I bet anything after they ran, because you said it was a couple weeks, it smelt whatever they cooked on that, whatever food or whatever they cooked on that stove, and it came in to try to scavenge, and it got caught up in the ties. And that's probably what happened. And they're like, hey, it's a perfect excuse.
But like I said, there's no evidence to show that anything was caught in the ties. But on the other side of it, that night, apparently, according to the journals, they were cooking a loin of pork, which, if that smell's coming out of there, that's going to attract all sorts.
Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, yeah, and it doesn't know how to get around a tent. I mean, it's going to go to where the smell was, and if the stove was near the exit areas, it's going to go to the area where the stove is. It's not going to waste its time and energy to rip a new hole into it. But I mean, it probably was walking around and everything, and the mess of the tent from the snowfall and everything falling on it, loose, like I showed you, that front rope, how loose it is. I mean, that will entangle any kind of animal.
But like I said, according to the investigations, the front fastenings and also the front of the tent, there was no evidence of any markings, any sign of trying to get an ingress from it, and also from the inside, no attempt to try and open that either.
Yeah, no. I believe it was probably circling around first and seeing where the smell's coming from, and probably on its second or third pass, it got caught up. So yeah, there wouldn't be any. I mean, if it got caught up, it wouldn't rip it open anyways. I mean, mountain lions, they'll encircle a tent 2 or 3 times before they even think about trying to get into it. Usually they'll just put their paw on it to see how sturdy it is before wasting their time. I mean, animals are smarter than what we give them credit for.
Try saying that to my cat. Yeah, I see where you're coming from there, but like I say, that is just one of the theories. Evidential wise, from what I've seen, I don't think it's a wolverine at all. Not a cat's chance. I just think it's somebody thinking, well, hang on, if they did manage to spray something inside, that'd give an excuse for them to nip out the back. So I do really think if you were to put that on a scale of 1 to 10, I would put the wolverine theory even in the minus scale for that.
Okay, so just bear with me. Can we pay attention to some of the questions that are in chat? There's one or two come up there. If you can see them, Steve, and comment on them. They couldn't get out the front, so they cut the back. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest for or against that, is there?
No, the evidence which actually is there is that, the front part was still all tied up, so they didn't get out the front. And like I said, what they did, there was 2 types of cuts at the back. One was like an incision, which would be a smallish one that they could open with the fingers and have a look out, sort of, put their eye up against it and see what it was like outside. And then once they've seen that it was actually clear, then they made larger cuts to the bottom, like slashed all the way across it, so they could open it up and go out underneath there. And that is evidential.
So they crawled out on all fours from smaller slits in the back of the tent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's just a last ditch effort move for some reason. My mind can't wrap around why they would do that.
Which is exactly right, because I can't get my head around why they would leave without clothes, or why they wouldn't leave without the boots. So something was enough to spook a seasoned group of hikers enough to leave the safety of the tents to go out to sub-zero temperatures and high winds.
That's why I've always thought that they stumbled into something that was by its very nature enough to drive them out of panic,
Did they find any like survival gear or anything on any of the bodies?
No, basically
when they ran out.
What they've done is they'd used other people's clothing to try and keep warm. That's basically all they had.
Okay, see that, like, being a seasoned outdoorsman, you don't go out in the middle of nowhere without at least like the basic fire essentials. Once you get to a safe area, a flint and steel or a mag bar or something to be able to start a fire in those conditions. That it's like an ounce to carry that.
This is the whole point of it, though, isn't it? That something that these people were so seasoned as what they were doing, so professional in what they were doing, that something happened to actually shift that professionalism away from them and made them do something which would be totally out of order for them to do at any other time. And that's the bottom line of it all.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was shock.
Yeah.
Something shocking.
It's that fight or flight. Sorry.
No, absolutely. I mean, the fact that, Steve alluded before to the orange orb thing, and that to me it's consistent with some sort of technology or some sort of weaponry that would have shocked them out of the tent. I would have run a mile if I'd seen something like that, because these devices would have, made a hell of a noise and would have killed whatever was in range of them. I don't know. It is very, very interesting.
I mean, even when I've been on like Sasquatch hunts and everything, like I've seen lights in the woods, like orb-like lights, and I never had the feeling to pack up to get out of there and leave my stuff. Like, because I know if I run the wrong way or whatever, I'm going to be in worse danger than I am with those lights, because the wilderness will kill you quicker than anything except for weapons.
Okay, so can I just put something to you?
Yeah.
You're saying that you wouldn't leave wherever unless you had that kind of stuff with you. What if something was so horrifying and so different, so anything that you'd ever encountered before, that actually did freak you out enough? Are you saying that you would still be able to sort of hold your own and sort of go, I'll tell you what, I'm thinking logically and do that? Or would absolute abject terror, fear take over and it's a case of like, I don't give a damn, I'm off?
Depending on where I am, depending on if I know my area or not. If I don't know my area and that straight fear sends me off into the woods, and I run 8 to 10 miles into those woods in the middle of the night, you know how many health hazards is going to be out in those woods that will hurt me more than whatever that is? I mean, I can break a leg. I could I could be running through the trees and a branch jabs straight through my eye. I mean,
yeah,
if
but
you're
in the cold light of, in that moment, in the middle of nowhere, freezing temperatures and everything else, and you see something or witness something that is so scary, I know for a fact I probably wouldn't sort of case. I'll just look round. I need this, I need that, I need the other. I'd be off and I'd take my chances.
Well, see, I have an emergency small bag that is a part of my kit, but it's separate. It's on Velcro that I just, instead of grabbing my whole entire rucksack or anything like that, I can just grab that small pack off my bag and run with it. It has a Mylar blanket in it. It has a ferro rod and stuff like that. So if I do get to a place that's safe, I can throw that Mylar blanket on me and make a fire with my fire steel.
Yeah, but what if that emergency kit was on the other side of wherever you were staying? Would you go over and find that and then scupper around, try to find exactly it is, and then get it out your bag or whatever? Or would
I
you?
would, in that situation, yes, I would scuffle around, rip it off, then I would cut a giant hole in the tent like they did and escape.
Well, all I can say is you're a better man than I am, seriously.
Well, it's not that. It's my fear. It's my fear of which way do I want to die more? Do I want to die freezing cold and suffering, or die in 2 seconds?
But in that
it's like a Sasquatch. If I run into a pissed off Sasquatch, it's going to rip me in half, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I run or if I stay there. It's going to capture me and it's going to rip me in half.
So would you take the chance in those few seconds of going looking for that kit, thinking that I've got 5 seconds, it could be in here in 3 and rip me apart in 2, or just get out there before you and give yourself at least some kind of chance?
I would take the chance of hoping I can get away from the situation and get somewhere safe that Sasquatch does not know, and maybe hold up, that I've never been in that situation, but my mindset is to take the survival chance of being able to continue my life, because I have a wife. So I want to survive to be able to see her again, you know? And
okay, well, to butt in, I mean, you know, the Sasquatch cryptid side of it is only one of many different theories, so I don't want to hang too much on that, because that's not the only explanation as to what might have happened. So, I mean, you've just made a pretty good quote there, actually, in the side chat regarding the mines there, Nodge, if you want to read that out and let everybody know about that one. Is he on mute again?
Sorry, Dave. Yeah, I was.
You was, weren't you?
Backing up one of the theories. Sorry, Steve.
Saying your kebabs turned up.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you know, that would make me get out of a tent very quickly, chasing a kebab. But the theory that I was talking about was that speculation exists that the campsite fell within the path of a Soviet parachute mine exercise. The theory alleges that hikers, woken by loud explosions, fled the tent in the shoeless panic and found themselves unable to return for supply retrieval. After some members froze to death attempting to endure the bombardment, others commandeered their clothing only to be fatally injured by subsequent parachute mine concussions. There are records of parachute mines being tested by the Soviets.
Okay, so there's records showing that kind of activity was going on at the time.
Yeah,
somebody.
Yeah. The other thing, Dave, is that would fit in with the orange orbs, because as Steve's already said, you know, that's consistent, if you like, with the signature of those weapons.
And that explains why they couldn't get any survival equipment.
Yeah, it would do. It would also explain why 3 of them died of profound trauma injuries, whilst the rest of them sort of got out of the way, but died of hypothermia, maybe.
Okay,
anything you want to add to that, Steve?
Not really. I think that's pretty much covered that side of it. I mean, like we just discussed about the cryptid side of it, and yeah, the spheres and everything else that goes along with that. We did cover earlier. I do think that something strange had happened, and it probably was a case of they ran into something that they shouldn't have ran into, and paid the consequences of it, basically.
Okay, well, addressing something that was mentioned earlier about katabatic winds. Katabatic, meaning descending, is a drainage wind, and a simple look on Google will tell you that. A wind that carries high density air from a higher elevation down a slope under the force of gravity, given the location of the...
Very rare.
Yep.
Okay, I got to get off here, guys. I'm sorry for taking up y'all's time.
Okay, no worries. You take it easy, Matthew, and thanks for joining in.
Matthew.
Cheers, Matthew.
Anytime. Y'all take care, brothers. Yeah,
Cheers.
Love y'all. Bye.
Bye for now.
Yeah, the other name for the katabatic wind is gravity wind, as you sort of said.
Yeah, I was trying to.
Yeah. Interesting.
And known for also known as fall winds, rush down elevated slopes at hurricane speeds, but most are not as intense as that, and many are only 10 knots. 10 knots, which is 18 kilometers an hour, not really known for blowing people down mountainsides either.
No.
Very, very rare meteorologically, though. Very rare.
Okay, so katabatic winds normally follow avalanches. Is an area where there isn't a lot of avalanches, or not known for avalanches, so obviously we can rule out avalanches. Katabatic winds, probably very unlikely. The damage done, photographic evidence of the area also suggesting not an avalanche. So, you know, what else are we sort of left with? I mean, the chances of it being a cryptid, a Yeti, I find difficult to believe, and nothing to suggest that other than a photo that looks like a human being. So really we're left with what?
Infrasound and military tests. I would suggest. But...
Infrasound and military tests. Okay, an infrasound generated by geological movements, fissures opening up. What kind of thing are we looking at for that being a possibility?
Yeah, and this goes back to the work of Donny Icar, but it's hard to know. I mean, it's I don't know. It's an interesting one, that, isn't it? What do you think about that one, Steve? I've never been quite convinced by that one, but.
I don't know. I mean, we all know about the infrasound stuff anyway, because of the experiments that have been done over the years with the American military. The problem is that I found with infrasound in a natural case is it's like basically pretty much like the sort of group. It has to be in the right place, in the right time, under the right conditions. And I just find it not to be in the right conditions, if you understand what I mean. If you were to actually look at what those conditions are, none of it would match anything to do with the Dyatlov group. But one of the things that I do find really strange, and you can slap me down the pair of you after for this, because that's what you're there to do, is gravity fluctuations.
Yeah. Interesting. The only problem is that I know, as from a geological background, that on the Russian steppe there, I mean, okay, possibly different than the Ural Mountains, but the whole part of that globe in Asia is cratonic. It's those areas, the cratons, are basically 3-4 billion years old, and they're fairly geologically stable. But you're right. I mean, there are gravity fluxes all over the globe every day, because we don't live on a sphere, as we all know. We live on an oblate spheroid, so gravity is stronger in some places than it is in others, that's for sure.
I know what you were saying there, because we do get these fluctuations that come enough not to be noticeable, but there are serious scientists who said that on the night in question, there's a possibility that these fluctuations were enough literally to lift the group off the ground and float them out of the tent. Personally, I don't believe it, but again, we're looking at possibilities and probabilities, and it's worth mentioning.
Okay, we've got
sorry, Dave.
We're just going to address something in the chat. Excuse me, but I go stop saying, being former military, I could see concussion trauma with paramines, but you would see shard damage. You say, but using explosives at a mountainside would have caused avalanche conditions. Yeah,
good point. Yeah.
Again, so really, technically, we could sort of then get rid of the explosive mines then out of the question, the floating mines, because obviously there's no avalanche which was shown there anyway.
And no shard damage.
No, none at all. According to them, it was just no soft tissue damage to the outside. It was the rib cage and the internal organs that had been damaged.
Of course, we are assuming that the Soviet authorities didn't come around later and cleanse the site. Well,
it wasn't allowed to be gone near for 3 years after it. Yeah. It was out of bounds for 3 years. So I mean, you can do an awful lot in 3 years.
It's possible they've tidied up the site anyway and removed any of that sort of evidence. We just don't know, do we?
And regarding the gravity thing, it's surely, if that was the case, the gravity at that one spot that would lift them up from the tent, confined within that very localized area, would that not deposit them in the same kind of locale when gravity returned to normal, or as is normal in the relative area, rather than deposited them over a wide area?
To my knowledge, Dave, there's no reported or recorded or even postulated gravimetric fluctuation that would be so great. That's more, you're talking about more than 1G. I mean, most gravity fluctuations on the Earth are measured in very, very minute, very, very, very small proportions of 9.8 meters a second, the standard gravity of the Earth. So it would need to be a huge reversal of the gravimetric field. I mean, possibly, Steve, that might sort of tie in with the signature of a UFO, which are obviously, a lot of sightings have reported huge shifts in gravity. But
Well, if we actually look at this in theoretics, which obviously we are doing because we've got no proof of any of it, but we would have to look and say, well, what if the possibility is that the field, if it is some kind of field, these gravitic waves or whatever they are, didn't just sort of like switch on or off, like you see in a sci-fi movie where they click a button and it's gravity on or gravity off. But what if there was like sections of it sort of like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and they sort of like flirted about or whatever. So you'd get one person flung one way, one another. We don't know because, like I say, it is all theoretics. And what you were saying, Nodge, is down to the fact of gravitational fields with UFOs. But in a lot of UFO cases where gravity fields have been felt, it's usually a case of that somebody has been drawn up to it, or they've been put away sort of like either a tractor or pressure beam or something like that. And it's not been over a large area with a number of people. So I'm going back to, say, the theoretics of a gravity fluctuation and saying that the switching on and off could be different in different areas for different people. I don't think if it was a case of gravity fluctuation that it would just switch off and they'd all drop to the ground. I think if there was a fluctuation of some kind, that it would affect each person in a different way. So that's why they ended up in different places if gravity fluctuations were actually the case.
Okay, well, in another postulation towards the avalanche theory would be the officialdom reaction to the case. As you say, it wasn't allowed to be. Did you say nobody was allowed near the area for 3 years?
3 years after the initial investigation, it was banned. It was barred from anybody actually going on that route in that area or anything. And that was around the time that they were also doing the examinations of the Mensa people as well.
Okay, so while they've been investigating the indigenous population to that region, nobody's allowed there for 3 years. And my question would be, if this was an act of nature, if this was simply an avalanche or katabatic winds, why?
Exactly. It makes no sense on so many levels.
True.
And yet, again, we're being told that we have to follow the government line. Same in a lot of UFO investigations. The government tell you one thing. Remember Project Blue Book? Everything was a weather balloon or a low-flying 747 wearing glasses. They always had an excuse for it. And it got to a point that the likes of Jalen Einert, when he came out with his famous statement for swamp gas, had to sit back and say, you know what, this is a load of crap. And this is basically the same with the Dyatlov pass incident, that we fed so much information, which is nonsense, that we're being told that it was an avalanche, and the evidence obviously shows that it was not an avalanche.
Yep, agree.
So whichever way you pan it out, the official line is very crooked, to say the least. It's not believable.
Evidentially, no, not at all. Because if you look at what they say, it was so easy to trawl out in 1959. It was so easy to trawl out in 2020. And basically, it's the same thing. Yeah, there's 100 expeditions that have been up between then and now and said this area is not susceptible to avalanches.
Okay, and given the fact that avalanches are obviously well documented, what about the detritus from an avalanche? The way that it looks in relation to the way that we're led to believe that an avalanche is responsible for this, that things are deposited, that the tent will completely stay in place. And it doesn't take much to look online to find out that avalanches don't work like that. If there's an avalanche, everything gets swept along in the path. Exactly.
I mean, we sort of discussed it earlier on as well, that, this avalanche that sort of came about, it didn't respond in the same way, because where the camp was actually at, when the avalanche would have come down, it would have scooted round it. It literally would have left the camp in the middle of it while it went round it. They were saying that the way it would work with the wind speeds of that night, and they checked back on it, it was like 20 to 30 meters per second, and temperatures reaching -40. That this would not allow a snow slide to actually begin either, because the snow would settle at a certain way and not be sort of like prevalent to sort of go, oh, hang on, let's start sliding here. If anything, it would actually keep it in place.
So anybody wishing to believe the Soviet government's explanation of what went on has to take into account the fact that avalanches were not recorded in that area. Katabatic winds aren't responsible for that kind of damage. They're very rare indeed and localized, even to the extent that they're given individual names for the region that they occur in. And the Dyatlov Pass, that region isn't known for katabatic winds either. The pictorial evidence rules against avalanche. The disposition of the bodies also rules against avalanche. The topography of the area rules against an avalanche. So there's a lot of reasons why an avalanche is complete and utter rubbish, really.
Most definitely. I mean, you think of it, right? There's a possibility of 20 different explanations of what happened that night. KGB agents, we've pretty much ruled out, but again, you don't know because we haven't got the full insides outs of it. The fact that they were mistaken for or attacked by Gulag fugitives, no evidence for at all. Military tests, well, you know what? There's actually evidence to show that there was no military testing done in that area, in that vicinity, within that time frame, at least a month before and a month after. Special forces coming up there, again, that could be something else entirely, but again, nothing for it. Mansi, we've ruled that out. Mushrooms, contaminated soil, that's a possibility, but again, no proof showing in the autopsies or what we've been able to see from an autopsy. Avalanche or slab avalanche, out of the question. UFOs or aliens, well, we found out that these possible spheres at the night could have been, again, but that's been ruled out for the test area, that it could have been some kind of weapons testing. Secret launches comes under the same banner. Infrasound wasn't the right conditions for that to actually happen. Yeti, that's been ruled out because it was definitely a fellow there in his clothing. Teleportation experiment, that's been put forward, but actually people have mistaken that because it was to do with a film in the 2000s called The Devil's Pass, and one of the things in it was a horrible teleportation experiment that went wrong. Lightning strike and ball lightning, again, wasn't the right conditions for it. The stove, people were saying that the stove itself caused either a fire that made people come out, no evidence, or the gases from the stove made them go a bit doolally, but again, no evidence for that either. Gravity fluctuations, we spoke about, that can go out the window. Katabatic winds, not a chance because they follow the avalanches. Wolverine, pretty much that's a nonsense as well. Methanol poisoning, they were saying that they were actually drinking medicinal alcohol and that sent them mad. Actually, what was the point when they had actually bottles of vodka that they took with them for having a drink and none of them were opened? What would you rather have? Drink of vodka or a drink of medicine alcohol? You know, go figure. Altercation on the pass, they reckon it was a case of that somebody was a bit annoyed that he took a fancy to a woman and then it kicked off. No, it didn't. These were friends for a long time, got on really well, and there was no romantic incidents with any of them. And then the Arctic hysteria, that's out of the window as well because that affects certain people in certain situations, and these situations weren't the case. So basically, after everything we've discussed tonight and everything that's supposed to be an official explanation, I honestly still say this is a stinking mystery that we'll never get to the bottom of until we get some more information.
Nodge, do you want to give us an overview of your thoughts, given what Steve just said there?
I don't think I could possibly better that, Dave. I think Steve's, really analysed every eventuality. Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely. I think it is a mystery. I don't think we are ever likely to know. I do believe that the Soviet authorities weren't truthful about their explanations, which has obviously muddied the waters. It'd be interesting to see if anything comes forward in the future, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And lots of different investigations have been undertook by people with various narratives, and the results obviously have been contoured to suit those narratives, as we've seen. We've discussed a couple of them. Some of them more vocal than others, and some of them, like I say, with a motive. It certainly stinks. Does it point towards the government? Does it point towards an accident, Steve?
I don't think it was an accident. Because, like I say, to be honest, the one which you would consider to be a big accident in everything that you look at in this neck of the woods and everything else, you would say an avalanche. But it's not. It most definitely isn't. I do think something has gone on there. What I really haven't a clue, but I do think, and I strongly believe on just looking at all the stuff that I've researched, to say that the government have covered something up, whether it's something they try to hide because it's something they've done, or something they're trying to hide so that nobody else can find out.
Okay, so accident or government, Nodge?
I just think that the Soviet authorities have not painted themselves in a good light, because they blame, they blame the explorers themselves, and it's quite patently obvious that these guys knew exactly what they were doing. They knew how to traverse the landscape. They knew how to camp. They were experienced. They knew the weather conditions. Steve's already said, the weather conditions and all that stuff wouldn't have been anything that they wouldn't have been able to cope with. I don't believe it was an accident. I think they stumbled into something or onto something that possibly they shouldn't have done. I don't know what it was, but I agree with Steve. I don't think it could possibly have been an accident, really.
Okay, so whichever way it pans out, we're dealing with the death of 9 people, 1 survivor. I would posit this forward as well. Also, you would think, given the facts of how tight a group they were, I mean, Yuri Yudin was the guy who turned back because of ill health, that if there was any kind of interscene kind of rivalry within the group, that he would have been vocal about this and let people know that there was some kind of discord, and as well as romantic involvement.
Definitely, but the thing is, like you said, there was nothing like that. Everybody got on with each other. There was a couple of people who sort of had the hots for the Lyudmila, because she was like the pin-up girl, but it never came into anything like that, for the simple reason they were all friends. They all got on with each other. I mean, they were cracking jokes. They used to sing songs together around the campfire, get there playing the old mandolin. This was a group of solid friends who honestly believed that they were going up to a mountain to get this grade 3 certificate so they could get on with doing a hell of a lot more hiking, which is what they all enjoyed.
I agree, and I think that level of professionalism, I mean, that grade 3 is a serious qualification, that they would have been aspiring to. I don't think any sort of personal issues any of them would have allowed to become a factor, because it's quite obvious they're all there to try and improve their skills.
Okay, so all we really can take from this is the fact that, or the only true fact, is that a group of experienced mountaineers, people that were au fait with not only equipment, but what would be facing them during this adventure, died in a mysterious way, with injuries that aren't congruent to what the official line has been led us to believe, and that this is going to be just one of those enduring mysteries that is going to remain until, if possible, more information is released by the now Russian government. And before we close, I'll put this to you first, Steve. What do you think the likelihood is of that? I mean, obviously, the Russian government's come forward with more information from the Cold War, even regarding ufology, which we may cover at one stage as well. What's the likelihood that the Russians are going to give us more information about what really happened at the Dyatlov Pass?
Well, can you say one thing before I go into that? And that's, we do need to remember, because of the families out there, that these 9 people who died, it was always somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's brother, whatever. And I know a lot of people, it does get lost when we talk about stuff like this, that we look at it as a case where for some people it's more than that. So I just wanted to say that. But as far as it goes with the Russian, I really don't know. I mean, there's only just at the moment like little bits of evidence coming out about astronauts or cosmonauts who had died long before, Gagarin was given the medal to say he was the first man in space, which is looking pretty obvious now that he wasn't. So who's to say that these could not just be ending up on the sideline for a good number of years till it gets to a point where they have to sort of sit back and go, you know what, something did go on. If it did, we just have to wait and see. And I do hope, for the sakes of the families, for those that are involved, that we do get some kind of closure for them at a period of time. I still think it's one of the greatest mysteries that goes on the planet, because you can look at it from so many different angles and say this happened, this could have happened, this and this. The more you look at it, the more you can sweep out of the way and say, you know what, no, something went on, we just still don't know what.
Okay, Nodge, and what are your thoughts? Do you think that we're ever likely to hear more information from the Russian government regarding what happened? What are your thoughts?
Just to concur with Steve as well, Dave. I agree absolutely. You know, these are personal stories and personal tragedies. So I would double down on that. I don't believe that we would see anything new, because the Russian regime that has set itself up in the wake of the USSR reopened this investigation, and that 2019 investigation basically came forward with the same conclusions: avalanche, snow slab, or a hurricane, and none of us buy into that. I don't believe that Putin's Russia is any more truthful than Stalin's Russia.
Okay, and with that being said, I also think that it's unlikely that any kind of information is going to be forthcoming that will underline any of the salient points within this topic, or even put a lid on it, draw a line under it, however you want to term it. I think this will remain one of those open-ended mysteries because of the region that we're dealing with and the need for secrecy and distrust of the rest of the world, unfortunately.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, that being said, I'll put the side chat open to one or two more questions if there is any. If not, we'll bring it to a close. So if there's anybody in the side chat that would like to put a question forward to any of us, please do that now, and we'll do our best to try and answer it, or at least come up with some kind of discussional tennis game regarding it, if you can do that. Because that's always a bit of fun. But it's been a very interesting one tonight. This one was chosen by Steve, so a good one to Steve there. It's certainly stirred up some interest in the side chat.
Cheers, mate.
People seem to have been interested in it, and thanks Matthew as well for joining us earlier on. I did a chat with Matthew last week regarding hunting Bigfoot and certain techniques and things regarding that. If anybody wishes to watch that, please do so. So thank you, Matthew, for joining us regarding one potential explanation as to why they left their tents and why there was flesh found on trees, apparently trying to climb them and all that. I'm not sure that I believe that. I know that I certainly personally don't believe the avalanche theory in any way, shape or form. There's just too much that rules it out.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem, Matthew. Thank you for that. So I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, so it just remains for me to thank everybody who joined us tonight, everybody in chat who's been in there and been involved and made a comment and watched this, especially the people that have stayed and watched it all the way through. Then obviously there's a level of dedication there that needs to be acknowledged. So thank you very much for that. There's been a lot of people pop in and out, so too many names to mention, but you all know who you are. So it just remains for me to say a good night from me.
And it's good night from me.
And good night from me.
I really appreciate everybody stopping by. You are all what make this channel, and all your comments are always welcome. We'll be back as soon as we can with another one. And what that is, you have to tune in to find out. So thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Take care. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
You've all been great.